Please, sir.
The gunshot came
We'll do
first,
anything.
then the screaming, then the pounding on Jack Hartwell's door, desperate dying sounds that tore through the Colorado blizzard like a woman's final prayer.
Pass is here. It's the
He knew
quickest
that
route.
sound.
It's heavily
He'd
guarded.
heard it 5
Keep your
years
weapons
ago
ready.
when his wife
We're ready,
Emma
Jack.
screamed for help he couldn't give. When his daughter Lily cried for a father who arrived too late.
Women out now, Jack.
4 women collapsed into his cabin when he opened the door. Blood on their hands, terror in their eyes, and words that stopped his heart. Please, sir, we'll do anything. Just don't let him take us back. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the very end of this story. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this tale travels.
Jack, I thought we'd
Now
never
let's
make
continue.
it back. You're safe now. You're
Jack
finally
Hartwell's
safe.
hands didn't shake when he pulled the door open. They hadn't shaken in 5 years, not since the day he buried his wife and daughter in the frozen ground outside Silver Ridge. A man learned to stop shaking when there was nothing left to fear. But tonight,
Please,
his
sir.
hands tightened on the doorframe.
We'll do anything.
4 women stood in his doorway. One collapsed the moment the door opened, her body hitting the wooden planks with a sound that made Jack's chest constrict. The others caught her before she went all the way down, 3 pairs of hands on one broken body, holding each other up the way survivors do when there's nobody else left. Help us! The woman who spoke had auburn hair plastered to her skull by snow and blood. Her green eyes held something Jack recognized too well. Desperation that had crossed the line into hopelessness. Please, sir, we'll give you anything. Anything you want. Just don't turn us away. The way she said it made Jack's stomach turn. Like she'd said those words before. Like she'd had to mean them. Get inside. Jack stepped back, his voice rough from disuse. He lived alone for a reason. Talking to people meant questions. Questions meant memories. Memories meant Emma's face in the moment she realized he wouldn't make it in time. The 3 standing women half carried, half dragged the 4th across his threshold. Snow followed them in and something else. The smell of fear. Sweat and blood, and the particular scent of people who'd been running for their lives. Jack shut the door against the blizzard and turned to face them. They stood in a tight cluster in the center of his one-room cabin, water pooling at their feet. The collapsed woman, barely more than a girl, really maybe 20, was conscious now, her dark eyes huge in a face gone gray with pain. Her left hand was wrapped in cloth that had once been part of a dress. Blood had soaked through and frozen solid. How long you been running? Jack moved to the fireplace, adding logs without looking at them directly. Sometimes people talked easier when you weren't watching. 3 days. The auburn-haired woman's voice carried traces of Ireland softened by years but not erased. Maybe 4. Hard to tell when you're not stopping. Where from? Silence. Jack glanced over his shoulder. The women were looking at each other, having some kind of conversation without words. The auburn-haired one seemed to be their leader. She was the one who finally spoke. You know the Blackwood Labor Company. Jack's hands stopped moving. He knew it. Everyone in Silver Ridge knew Clayton Blackwood's operation, or thought they did. Respectable businessman, importing workers for the railroad expansion, helping immigrant families find their way in America. That's what the newspapers said. That's what the town council believed. But Jack had been a Texas Ranger for 12 years before he came to Colorado. He knew the difference between a labor company and a slavery ring. I know it. He kept his voice neutral. You worked for Blackwood. Worked. The woman's laugh was bitter enough to curdle milk. That's a kind word for it, sir. We were owned by Blackwood, bought and paid for with our family's debts. Contract labor, they call it. Legal as Sunday church. Another woman spoke up, petite with black hair and Asian features. Her English was accented but precise. My father borrowed money to pay for medicine when my mother got sick. When he died, Blackwood said the debt passed to me. I was 16. My family's ranch. This came from a third woman, Mexican with fierce dark eyes and a bruise darkening her left cheek. Blackwood bought the land out from under us when my father couldn't pay the taxes. Said he'd forgive the debt if I came to work for him. Lied about what kind of work. Jack's jaw clenched. He knew what kind of work Blackwood put women into, the kind that broke spirits long before it broke bodies. And her. He nodded toward the youngest, the one with the wounded hand. Orphan. The Irish woman's voice softened. Blackwood's men found her when her foster family died of cholera. Told her she owed money for her upbringing. She's 20 years old, and she's never known a day of freedom in her life. The girl Becca, Jack would learn later, looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much too young. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. The story was written in the scars on her wrists where manacles had rubbed skin raw. Sit down. Jack gestured to the rough-hewn chairs near the fire. All of you, let me look at that hand. They moved cautiously like animals expecting a trap. Jack understood. Kindness was probably the thing they trusted least in the world. When they were seated, Jack knelt in front of Becca and carefully unwrapped the makeshift bandage. The wound underneath made him suck in a breath. Deep gash across the palm infected the flesh around it, angry red and swollen. How'd this happen? Barbed wire. The Irish woman answered for her. When we were climbing out of the compound, she got caught. Had to tear herself free. Jack stood and moved to his medical supplies. He'd been a ranger. He knew how to treat wounds, but his hands were steadier when he wasn't thinking about Emma's face, about how she'd looked when the outlaws were done with her. He forced the memory down and returned with whiskey, clean cloth, and needle and thread. This is going to hurt, he told Becca. The girl nodded. She'd probably hurt worse. Jack cleaned the wound with whiskey. Becca bit down on a leather strap, but didn't make a sound. Tough kid. She'd have to be to survive Blackwood. While he worked, the Irish woman talked. Her name was Margaret Brennan. Maggie, she said if he wanted to use it. The Asian woman was Sarah Chen. Sally to her friends, though she didn't say if Jack counted as one yet. The Mexican woman was Elena Rodriguez. She watched Jack's hands on Becca's wound with suspicious eyes, like she was waiting for him to turn cruel. Why come here? Jack tied off the final stitch and wrapped Becca's hand in clean cloth. Silver Ridge has law. Marshal's office right on Main Street. The women exchanged looks again. Maggie's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Marshal Gibbs is on Blackwood's payroll, she said. Half the town council is. The other half looks the other way because Blackwood brings in money and jobs. You think the law would help us? We're just immigrant women with no papers and no proof except the scars on our bodies. Then why here specifically my cabin? Silence stretched between them like a rope pulled taut. Finally, Maggie spoke. Because we heard about you. Jack Hartwell. Used to be a Texas Ranger until you refused orders to participate in a raid. They say you gave up your career because you wouldn't hurt innocent people. They say you came here to hide from what you'd seen. Jack's hands clenched. Who says that? One of the other women in the camp. She'd been there longer than us. She said if we ever got out, if we ever needed help, there was one man in Silver Ridge who might actually care. Maggie's green eyes held his. She said you'd lost your family, that you'd understand what it's like to be too late. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He stood abruptly, turning away from them toward the window. Outside, the blizzard was getting worse. Snow piled against the glass like the hand of winter itself trying to get in. That woman was wrong. His voice came out harder than he meant. I don't help people anymore. I make horseshoes and fix wagon wheels, and I don't get involved. You need to leave first thing in the morning. Head east toward the territorial line. Find a marshal who isn't corrupt. We can't. You can. You will. No. Maggie stood. Jack heard her footsteps crossing the cabin toward him. You don't understand. Blackwood doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. He has 20 men working for him. Trackers, enforcers, killers. They're probably already following our trail. We came here because we heard you were decent, because we thought maybe, just maybe, there was one man left in this godforsaken territory who remembered what it meant to protect people. Then you heard wrong. Jack didn't turn around. If he looked at her, if he saw that desperate hope in her eyes, he might do something stupid. I stopped protecting people 5 years ago, when I realized I was no good at it. That's not what we heard. What you heard was lies. We heard you tried to save your wife and daughter from outlaws, that you tracked them for 3 days but got there too late, that you killed all 6 men with your bare hands after you found what they'd done. Jack's fists clenched against the window frame. Don't. We heard you couldn't live with yourself after, that you turned in your ranger badge and came here to die slow and alone because you thought that's what you deserved. Stop talking. But here's what I think. Maggie's voice was right behind him now, close enough that he could feel the heat of her body through his shirt. I think you came here to hide, not from the world, from yourself, from the fact that you're the kind of man who cares enough to destroy himself when he can't save everyone. Jack turned. Maggie stood less than a foot away, her wet hair falling in tangled waves around her face, her green eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. I stopped caring 5 years ago, he said. Liar. The word hung between them. If you didn't care, Maggie said quietly, you would have turned us away. You wouldn't have let us in. You wouldn't have stitched up Becca's hand with fingers as gentle as if she were your own daughter. You wouldn't be standing here trying to convince me you're not worth saving when all I asked was for you to help us save ourselves. Before Jack could answer, a sound cut through the blizzard. Faint, but unmistakable. Horse hooves. Multiple horses, moving fast through the snow. All 4 women went rigid. Becca made a small sound in her throat like a trapped animal. He found us, Elena whispered. Dios mío, he found us already. Jack moved to the window. Through the swirling snow, he could make out shapes. 6 riders, maybe 7. They moved with purpose, not the wandering pattern of travelers lost in a storm. These were men who knew exactly where they were going. Put out the lamp, Jack said. His voice had changed. Gone was the broken blacksmith hiding from his past. In its place was the Texas Ranger who'd spent 12 years tracking the worst humanity had to offer. Sally moved quickly to extinguish the light. Darkness swallowed the cabin. In the sudden quiet, Jack could hear the women's breathing. Fast and shallow. The sound of prey that knew the predator was close. The horses stopped outside. Boots hit snow with heavy thuds. Then silence. Then a voice. Smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. Mr. Hartwell, my name is Clayton Blackwood. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Jack's hand found his rifle in the darkness. He'd cleaned it just that morning, same as he did every morning. Old habits from his ranger days. He'd told himself it was just routine. Now he knew better. Some part of him had been waiting for this. Some part of him had known that sooner or later, someone would come to his door, asking him to be the man he used to be. Don't know what you're talking about, Jack called back. Just me and my forge here. That's interesting, because my men tracked 4 sets of footprints right to your door. Fresh prints, Mr. Hartwell. Still melting on your porch. Beside Jack, Maggie's hand found his arm in the darkness. Her fingers dug into his sleeve with desperate strength. Please, she breathed. Don't give us to him. We'll leave right now. Just give us 5 minutes to get clear. In this blizzard, Jack's voice was low. You'd die of exposure in an hour. Better than going back. The quiet certainty in her words told Jack everything he needed to know about what Blackwood's compound was like. Mr. Hartwell. Blackwood's voice carried false friendliness. I'm a reasonable man. A businessman. Those women ran off with clothes and supplies they didn't pay for. That's theft. Now I'm willing to overlook the crime if they come back peacefully. But if you harbor them, if you interfere with the recovery of my lawfully contracted workers, well, that becomes a legal matter. Lawfully contracted, Elena spat. He makes it sound so clean, so respectable. How much? Jack called out. The question surprised even him. "Excuse me. How much do they owe you for the clothes and supplies? I'll pay it." Silence from outside. Then Blackwood's laugh, genuinely amused. "Mr. Hartwell, these women's contracts are worth considerably more than some fabric and food. Miss Brennan alone owes me $3,000. The others are similar. Unless you've got $12,000 sitting in your blacksmith shop, I don't think you can afford to buy their freedom." $12,000. Jack made maybe $500 a year at the forge. It would take him 24 years to earn that much. 24 years of every penny going to pay off debts he didn't owe for women he'd met an hour ago. The smart move was obvious. Open the door. Let Blackwood take them. Go back to his quiet life of regret and horseshoes. He'd tried to help. That was more than most men would do. No one could blame him for stepping aside when the cost was this high. He felt Maggie's hand slip away from his arm. She'd heard the math too. She knew what was coming. "It's all right," she whispered, not to him, to her sisters. "We tried. That's more than we had before." Sally's hand found hers in the darkness. Then Elena's. Then Becca's bandaged fingers. 4 women holding on to each other because they had nothing else left. And Jack saw them. Not as they were now desperate fugitives hiding in his cabin, but as they'd been before Blackwood, before the debts and the contracts and the nights that broke them in ways that left no visible scars. He saw Maggie as a girl in Ireland, probably smart and fierce and full of dreams about America. He saw Sally as a daughter trying to save her mother, not knowing the price would be her own freedom. He saw Elena as a rancher's daughter who'd grown up on horseback, proud of her heritage. He saw Becca as a child orphaned and alone, easy prey for men like Blackwood. And he saw Emma. Always Emma. Her face the day he'd married her. The way she'd laughed when she told him she was pregnant. The hope in her eyes when she talked about the kind of father he'd be. The way she'd looked at him in those final moments when she knew he wasn't going to make it in time. "Mr. Hartwell." Blackwood's patience was wearing thin. "I'm going to count to 10. Then my men are coming in. You can step aside and let us take what's ours, or you can make this difficult. Your choice." Jack's hands tightened on the rifle. 1. 5 years. 5 years of telling himself he was done helping people. 5 years of believing he didn't have the right to try anymore. 2. Emma's voice in his memory. "You're going to save so many people, Jack. I just know it." 3. "I wasn't built to stand by and watch bad things happen," he'd told her once. 4. "Then don't," she'd said. "Don't ever let yourself become that kind of man." 5. But he had become that kind of man. The moment he'd buried her and Lily, he'd buried the part of himself that believed he could make a difference. 6. Maggie's voice quiet in the darkness. "Thank you for trying." 7. Becca's small sound of fear. 8. Elena's whispered prayer in Spanish. 9. Sally's hand squeezing Maggie's tighter. 10. Jack heard the door handle turn. Watched it swing open. Saw Blackwood's silhouette framed in the doorway, tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who looked respectable in town and revealed his true nature only when no one important was watching. 6 men stood behind him. Armed. Dangerous. The kind of men who did terrible things for money and slept soundly after. Blackwood's eyes adjusted to the darkness. Found the 4 women huddled together. His smile was a predator's smile. "Ladies, did you really think you could run from me?" He stepped inside. His men followed, and Jack raised the rifle. "Stop right there." Blackwood froze. His eyes found Jack standing in the shadows, weapon aimed at the center of his chest. "Mr. Hartwell, let's not do anything rash. I'm buying their contracts. I just told you. Not with money." Jack's voice was steel. "With this rifle, and the 12 years I spent tracking men worse than you. You turn around. You ride back to your compound. You never come looking for these women again, and I don't hunt you down the way I know how." Blackwood's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "You're threatening me. In front of witnesses. I'm making you an offer. Last chance you'll get. I have 6 men with me. You have 1 rifle. The math doesn't work in your favor." "Maybe not, but I guarantee I get you before your men get me. Question is whether you're willing to die for $12,000 worth of merchandise." The word merchandise landed like Jack meant it to, exposing exactly what Blackwood thought these women were. Blackwood's facade cracked just slightly. His hand drifted toward his coat. "I wouldn't," Jack said quietly. "I've been killing men since before you figured out how to make slavery look legal. Don't test me." For a long moment, nobody moved. The blizzard howled outside. Inside, 6 of Blackwood's men waited for orders. 4 women held their breath, and 2 men stood on opposite sides of a line that Jack had sworn he'd never cross again. Then Blackwood smiled, really smiled like he'd just been dealt a winning hand. "All right, Mr. Hartwell, I'll leave, tonight, but you should know something." He gestured to his men, and they began backing toward the door. "I don't just own those 4 women. I own 23 others. Young ones. Pretty ones. They're back at the compound right now wondering if their friends are going to make it. Wondering if they'll ever see daylight as free women." Jack's jaw clenched. He saw where this was going. "You can save these 4, Blackwood continued. "Keep them hidden, maybe even get them out of the territory eventually. But those other 23, they belong to me. And every day you spend protecting these 4 is another day those others spend learning what happens to girls who think about running." He paused in the doorway, snow swirling around him. "So congratulations, Mr. Hartwell. You just became responsible for 27 women instead of none. Hope you can sleep at night knowing you saved 4 while leaving 23 to suffer." His smile was cruel. "I'll give you 2 days to think about it. 2 days to imagine what I'm doing to them right now, knowing their friends ran away and left them behind. Then I'll be back. And next time, I'll bring more men than you have bullets." He tipped his hat in mock courtesy. "Good evening, ladies. See you real soon." The door slammed shut. Horse hooves faded into the storm. Silence filled the cabin, like water filling a drowning man's lungs. Then Maggie spoke, her voice broken. "He's right. Oh God, he's right. We left them. We saved ourselves and we left them." She collapsed to her knees. Sally and Elena tried to hold her up, but they were crying too. Even Becca, silent until now, made a sound like her heart was breaking. Jack lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking again. 5 years without shaking, and now he couldn't make them stop. Because Blackwood was right. Jack had just chosen 4 women over 23. 4 survivors who'd made it to his door over 23 who hadn't. And in 2 days, Blackwood would come back with enough men to take these 4 anyway. Unless Jack did something impossible. Unless he became the man he'd buried 5 years ago. The Texas Ranger who'd once tracked 6 outlaws across half of Texas and made them pay for what they'd done to his family. The man Emma had believed he was. Jack looked at the 4 women weeping in his cabin, looked at the door Blackwood had just walked through, looked at the rifle in his shaking hands, and made a decision that would either save 27 women or get them all killed. "Maggie." His voice cut through their crying. "How many guards does Blackwood keep at the compound?" She looked up, confusion and hope warring in her eyes. "What?" "Guards. How many? I need to know exactly what we're walking into." Elena's voice was sharp. "What are you saying?" Jack set the rifle down and met their eyes. All 4 of them, these broken women who'd run 50 miles through a blizzard because death by exposure seemed better than 1 more day in Clayton Blackwood's hell. "I'm saying we have 2 days. 2 days to plan. 2 days to prepare. And then we're going to do something real stupid." He pulled his gun belt from its hook on the wall and strapped it on for the first time in 5 years. "We're going to walk into that compound and bring every single one of those women out, or die trying. Maggie stood slowly, Sally and Elena helping her to her feet. Becca rose too, cradling her bandaged hand against her chest. "You can't," Maggie whispered. "One man against Blackwood's entire operation. It's suicide." "Probably. Then why?" Jack thought of Emma, of Lily, of the promise he'd made at their graves that he'd never let his cowardice cost innocent lives again. "Because 5 years ago, I chose safety over action, and 3 people died. I've been dying ever since, just slower. Might as well die doing something that matters." He looked at each of them in turn. "But I can't do it alone. I need you 4. I need you to tell me everything about that compound. Guard rotations, weak points, where the women are kept, everything." "You're serious?" This from Sally, whose dark eyes had stopped crying and started calculating. "You'd really try this? If you help me, if you're willing to risk everything you just escaped from?" The 4 women looked at each other, having another one of those silent conversations. Jack waited. This had to be their choice. He couldn't save them if they weren't willing to fight alongside him. Finally, Maggie stepped forward. She held out her hand. 2 days to plan. Then we go get our sisters." Jack took her hand. Her palm was calloused from work. Her grip was strong despite the trembling. She held his eyes, and he saw something there that hadn't been present when she'd first arrived. Not hope. Not yet. But something close. The possibility of hope. The belief that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as helpless as Blackwood wanted them to believe. 2 days. Jack agreed. Outside, the blizzard raged on. Inside, 4 broken women and 1 failed Texas Ranger began planning something impossible. And somewhere in the darkness of Clayton Blackwood's compound, 23 women waited for rescue they didn't know was coming. The clock was ticking. The blizzard died sometime around midnight, leaving Silver Ridge buried under 3 feet of snow that glittered like broken glass in the moonlight. Jack stood at his window watching the world turn white and quiet, knowing that same silence was covering their tracks. Good for them. Bad for what came next. Behind him, the 4 women huddled around his table drawing maps in the dust and dirt Sally had spread across the rough wood. Maggie's finger traced lines that represented Wall's guard towers, the main compound building where Blackwood kept his office and his secrets. "The women sleep here." Maggie tapped a spot on the eastern side. 23 of them in one room, 2 guards outside the door at all times, another 2 patrolling the perimeter. "How often do the patrols complete their circuit?" Jack didn't turn from the window. Part of him was listening to them. The other part was listening to something else, the ghost of his ranger instincts waking up after 5 years of forced sleep. 15 minutes, maybe 20 in bad weather. Weapons, rifles, pistols. Victor Drummond. He's Blackwood's head enforcer. He carries a knife too. Likes to use it when Blackwood wants someone hurt but not killed. As a lesson. Elena's voice was tight when she spoke. "I saw him cut a girl once. She tried to run, got caught. He carved his initials into her shoulder so she'd remember who owned her." Jack's hands clenched against the window frame. "This Victor, where's he sleep?" "With Blackwood in the main house. They're close. Victor would die for him." "He might get his chance." Sally looked up from the map. "You're planning to kill them?" It wasn't a question. Jack finally turned to face them. "You want honest yes. Men like Blackwood and Victor don't stop because you ask nice. They don't reform. They don't see what they're doing is wrong. The only way to stop them permanent is to put them in the ground." "Good." Elena's dark eyes were hard. "They deserve worse than killing. But I'll settle for dead." Maggie's face was more complicated. She wanted them dead too. Jack could see it in the way her jaw set. But something in her was fighting it. The part that still believed in law and justice, and the idea that decent people didn't solve problems with bullets. "You got a problem with killing?" Jack asked her directly. She met his eyes. I have a problem with becoming them, with letting what they did to us turn us into murderers. Self-defense isn't murder. It is if we walk into their compound looking for blood. We're walking in looking for 23 women. If Blackwood and Victor get in the way, that's their choice. Maggie's hands flattened on the table. And what happens after? You think we can kill Clayton Blackwood, a respected businessman with connections to half the territory, and just walk away? They'll hang us, all of us. Maybe, but those 23 women will be free. The words hung in the air between them. Becca had been silent until now, cradling her bandaged hand. But she spoke suddenly in a voice so soft, Jack almost missed it. I would die to free them. That's not even a question. Sally nodded. Me too. We all would. But Maggie's right, we need to be smart about this. If we're going to risk everything, we should try to survive it. Jack pulled out a chair and sat down at the table with them. 5 years of isolation meant he'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than his own grief. Now, looking at these 4 women planning an impossible rescue, he remembered. All right, let's say we want to do this without getting hanged after. That means we need proof of what Blackwood's really doing, something so solid that even his friends on the town council can't ignore it. He keeps records. Maggie's voice picked up energy. Ledgers in his office, names of every woman he's bought, how much he paid, how much he's made selling their labor or their bodies. He's meticulous about it, proud even. Why keep records that could hang him? Because it's legal. That's the brilliant part. Contract labor is legal. Debt bondage is legal as long as the contracts are properly filed. He's not breaking any laws, he's just exploiting them. Jack's stomach turned. So even if we get the ledgers, they prove he's a slaver, but not technically a criminal. Maggie's frustration was palpable. I told you, the system is designed to let men like him operate in the open. Elena leaned forward. But there's other things in those ledgers. Things that aren't legal. The women he sold across state lines without proper papers. The ones who died and he didn't report. The bribes to officials. You saw these ledgers. I cleaned his office. He didn't think a Mexican girl with a mop could read English well enough to understand what she was looking at. He was wrong. Jack felt something shift in his chest. A plan forming. Dangerous. Probably stupid. But possible. So we need 2 things. The ledgers to prove what he is, and the women themselves as witnesses. If we can get both out of that compound and to someone who'll listen, who? Maggie's question cut through his planning. Marshall Gibbs is bought. The town council won't care. We already told you Blackwood owns this territory. Not all of it. Jack stood and moved to a trunk in the corner of his cabin. He hadn't opened it in 5 years. Dust covered the lid like snow. Inside were things from his ranger days, his badge, his commission papers, and something else. He pulled out a letter yellowed with age and brought it back to the table. James Thornton, federal marshal. He and I worked together tracking a gang that operated across state lines. Good man, honest man. Last I heard he was stationed in Denver. Denver's 4 days' ride from here. 3 if we push hard. 2 if we're desperate. Jack set the letter down. We get the women out. We get the ledgers. We make for Denver before Blackwood can catch us. Thornton will listen. More important, he'll act. Sally studied the letter like it was a holy relic. You think this will work? I think it's the only chance we've got that doesn't end with all of us dead or dangling from a rope. Maggie's fingers traced the edges of Jack's dust map. Walk me through it, step by step. How do we get 23 women out of a guarded compound without anyone dying? Jack pulled the map closer. His fingers moved across it, marking positions, timing weak points. The old instincts were fully awake now, running scenarios, calculating odds, planning for the 1,000 things that could go wrong. We go in 2 hours before dawn. Guards will be tired. That's when mistakes happen. Sally and Elena, you two know the compound layout. You'll be our guides. Maggie, you speak their language. The women will trust you. You'll keep them calm and quiet while we move them out. And Becca? The girl looked up when Jack said her name. You're our lookout. You stay outside with the horses. First sign of trouble, you sound the alarm." "I want to fight." Her voice was small but determined. "You will be fighting. Keeping those horses ready is what gets everyone out alive. That's the most important job of all." Becca nodded slowly, accepting it. Elena's finger stabbed at the map. "Victor's room is here. Blackwood's is adjacent. They're light sleepers. How do we get past them?" "We don't. We go through them." "You just said nobody has to die." "I said we'd try to do this smart. But I'm not leaving 2 vipers alive behind us where they can raise an alarm or come hunting after." Jack's voice was flat. "Victor and Blackwood die quiet. The guards we tie up. The women we save. That's the plan." Maggie's face had gone pale. "You make it sound simple." "It's not. It's the most dangerous thing any of us will ever do. But it's also the right thing. You asked me 2 hours ago if I could sleep at night knowing I left 23 women to suffer. Now, I'm asking, you? The 4 women looked at each other. Another one of those silent conversations. Jack watched them and understood that this moment mattered more than any other. They could back out. They could take the safety he'd offered and run for the territorial line at first light. Nobody would blame them. But Elena spoke first, her voice hard as iron. "I'm in. I want to see Victor's face when he realizes the women he terrorized are the ones who brought him down." Sally nodded. "I came to America because I believed it was a place where people could be free. Time to make that true for 23 sisters I've never met." Becca just held up her bandaged hand. "They did this to me. They did worse to others. I'm in." That left Maggie. She stared at the map for a long moment, her green eyes distant. Jack watched her wrestle with it, the fear and the fury, the desire for justice, and the knowledge that justice might require blood. "When I left Ireland," she said finally, "I was 17. I believed America was going to be everything the stories promised. Freedom, opportunity, a place where a smart girl with no money could still make something of herself." Her laugh was bitter. "Instead, I got off the boat and into debt within a month. $3,000 for passage room board, numbers on paper that turned into chains." She looked up at Jack. "Blackwood took my freedom, my dignity, 5 years of my life. He took it legal with contracts and ledgers and handshakes in offices. But taking something legal doesn't make it right." Her hand moved to the map covering the building where Blackwood slept. "I'm in. But not just for revenge. For every girl who comes to America believing in those stories. So they don't end up like me." Jack felt something in his chest unknot. These women weren't victims anymore. Somewhere between his door and this moment, they'd become something else, something dangerous. "Then we've got 36 hours to get ready. Sally, I need you to draw me a detailed layout of that compound. Every door, every window, every place a guard might be standing. Elena, tell me everything you know about Blackwood's routine. When he sleeps, when he wakes, who visits him. Maggie, I need a list of the women still inside. Names, conditions, who's injured, who can run, who'll need help." "And you?" Maggie asked. "I'm going into town. Time to call in some debts and gather supplies we're going to need." "Town." Sally's voice rose. "Blackwood's men could be watching. It's dangerous." "Everything from here on out is dangerous. Might as well start now." Jack stood and began gathering his coat and hat. The women watched him with expressions ranging from worried to impressed. He paused at the door. "One more thing. After tonight, there's no going back. We do this, we're all in together. We live together, or we die together. Anyone wants out, now's the time to say so." Nobody spoke. Jack nodded and stepped out into the pre-dawn cold. Silver Ridge was just waking when Jack rode in on the big roan he kept stabled behind his forge. The streets were empty except for a few early risers heading to work. Jack tied his horse outside Morrison's general store and waited for the old man to unlock his door. Jack Hartwell. Morrison's bushy eyebrows rose in surprise. Didn't expect to see you in town this early. Something wrong with your forge? Need supplies, Tom. Rope, food supplies for a week, ammunition for a Winchester, and 2 pistols. Morrison's expression shifted from surprised to concerned. That's a lot of ammunition, Jack. You going hunting? Something like that. Well, I got most of that. The ammunition might take a bit. Let me check the back. While Morrison disappeared into his stockroom, Jack surveyed the street through the store window. 2 of Blackwood's men stood outside the Silver Nugget Saloon, even though it was too early for drinking. They weren't drinking. They were watching. Jack turned away before they could make eye contact. Morrison returned with boxes of bullets. This should do you. That'll be $18 total. Jack counted out the money. Tom, you hear anything unusual last night? Any commotion? The old man's face grew cautious. Heard Blackwood's boys rode out in that blizzard. Came back empty-handed and mean as snakes. Why? Just curious. Jack? Morrison leaned across the counter, his voice dropping. I've known you 5 years. You keep to yourself. You don't cause trouble. You do good work. Whatever you're thinking about getting into, don't. I'm not thinking about anything. Blackwood's men are looking for someone, or some people. They've been going door to door since they got back, asking questions, offering rewards for information. Jack's jaw tightened. What kind of information? About 4 women, runaways from his labor company. He's calling it theft of contract property. Marshal Gibbs has authorized a search. So it was starting. Blackwood was tightening the noose. In another day, maybe less, he'd work up enough nerve to search Jack's cabin. The window for action was narrowing. Thanks for the warning, Tom. Jack gathered his supplies and headed for the door. Morrison called after him. Jack, whatever you're planning, be careful. Blackwood's got reach, and he doesn't forget. Neither do I. Outside, Jack loaded his supplies onto his horse. The 2 men across the street were still watching. One of them started walking toward him. Jack didn't run. Running meant guilt. Instead, he checked his saddle straps with careful deliberation, taking his time. You're Hartwell. The man who spoke had a scar running from his eye to his jaw. His hand rested on his pistol. The blacksmith. That's right. Boss wants to talk to you. Your boss can come to my forge during business hours like everyone else. Now's better. Jack turned to face him fully. The man was younger than him, maybe 30, with the look of someone who'd learned to hurt people and liked it. Behind him, his partner was drifting closer, flanking. I don't work for your boss, so unless you've got legal authority to detain me, step aside. Scarface's smile was mean. Legal authority. That's funny. You know what else is funny? Those tracks we followed last night led right to your door. Lots of people come to my door. I'm a blacksmith. At midnight, in a blizzard, 4 people. 4 customers. Needed emergency work done. That's so. Then you won't mind if we come by and verify your story. Jack's hand moved casually toward his belt. Not threatening, just ready. You got a warrant. Don't need one. Blackwood's property, Blackwood's rules. My cabin's not Blackwood's property. Yet. The word hung in the air like a threat. Everything in Silver Ridge belongs to Mr. Blackwood eventually, one way or another. Jack held the man's gaze. He could see it playing out, these 2 trying to force him, Jack defending himself, bodies in the street, and the whole rescue plan dead before it started. He needed to de-escalate. Tell your boss I'll come by this afternoon. We can talk civilized. Boss said now. And I said this afternoon. Unless you want to try forcing me, which I don't recommend. The 2 men exchanged glances. They were calculating odds, trying to figure if Jack was as dangerous as his reputation suggested. 5 years ago, every outlaw in Texas knew that Jack Hartwell was someone you didn't push. These 2 were younger. They didn't have that history. But something in Jack's stance, in the way he stood relaxed but ready, must have communicated enough. Scarface backed down half a step. This afternoon then, 3 o'clock, Don't be late." "Wouldn't dream of it." Jack mounted his horse and rode out of town at a pace that said he had nothing to hide and nowhere urgent to be. But inside his mind was racing. Blackwood was moving faster than expected. The meeting this afternoon was a trap, a way to get Jack isolated where they could question him properly. Maybe torture him if they thought he was hiding something. Which meant they had even less time than he'd thought. Jack pushed his horse harder once he was out of sight of town. The sun was climbing now, turning the snow into a blinding white carpet. He needed to get back to the cabin. They needed to move the women somewhere safer before Blackwood's men came looking. And then he saw them. Riders. 3 of them coming up the trail toward his cabin from the opposite direction. They moved slow, searching the snowdrifts, following tracks that the blizzard hadn't quite covered. Jack's hand went to his rifle. But shooting them would only confirm what Blackwood suspected. He needed another play. He urged his horse into a gallop, taking a shortcut through the trees that would get him to the cabin first. Branches slapped at his face. Snow soaked through his coat. But he made it with maybe 5 minutes to spare. He burst through the door. "They're coming! 3 riders, 5 minutes out!" The women reacted instantly. Years of surviving Blackwood had taught them to move fast. Sally and Elena started erasing the dust map. Maggie grabbed her coat. Becca was already at the window. "Where can we go?" Maggie's voice was tight but controlled. Jack's mind spun through options. The forge next door had a small cellar, but it was the first place they'd look. The woods offered cover but no shelter, and the women were still weak from their run through the blizzard. Then it hit him. The church. Old St. Mary's up on the hill. It's abandoned. Nobody's been inside in years. Will we make it in time? If we leave right now. They moved. No arguments, no hesitation. Jack grabbed supplies while the women bundled into what warm clothes they had. 30 seconds later, they were out the door and running through the snow toward the hillside where St. Mary's stood like a ghost from Silver Ridge's better days. The church had been built in the town's early years when people still believed Silver Ridge might become something respectable. But the silver played out, and so did the optimism. Now the church stood empty, its windows broken, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Beautiful. Jack got them inside just as he heard horses approaching his cabin below. Through the broken windows, they watched 3 men dismount and pound on his door. When no one answered, they kicked it in. "They'll search the place," Elena whispered. "Let them. They won't find anything except a blacksmith's workshop and an empty cabin." The minutes stretched like hours while Blackwood's men tore through Jack's home. Finally, they emerged empty-handed, mounted up, and rode back toward town. Jack let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "Now what?" Sally asked. Jack looked at the 4 women crowded into the abandoned church, cold, scared, hunted, but still standing. Still fighting. "Now we change the plan. We can't wait 2 days. Blackwood knows I'm hiding something even if he can't prove it yet. That meeting this afternoon is designed to break me or kill me. Either way, those 23 women don't have 2 days." "How long do they have?" Jack pulled out his pocket watch. 10 in the morning. The meeting was at 3. Which meant 14 hours. We go in tonight. Maggie's eyes went wide. "We're not ready. We don't have enough supplies, enough weapons. We don't have time. Tonight, while Blackwood's men are expecting me to walk into their trap, while they're focused on me instead of the compound. It's the only window we're going to get." The women looked at each other. That silent conversation again. But this time, it was faster, more decisive. They'd already committed. Now they were just accepting that the timeline had accelerated. "Tonight," Elena said. "Then we spend today preparing like our lives depend on it." They do. Jack moved to the church's small back room, where the old priest used to prepare for services. It was empty except for dust and memories, but it would work. He spread out the map Sally had drawn, weighted the corners with stones, and gathered the women around it. "From here on out, every second counts. Sally, you and I are going to scout approaches to the compound. I need to see it with my own eyes, verify what you've told me. Elena, you're going to teach Maggie and Becca everything you know about moving quiet. Where to step, how to breathe, how to not get caught. And the weapons? Maggie asked. Jack reached into his coat and pulled out 2 pistols. He'd brought them from his cabin without thinking, old instincts taking over. Can any of you shoot? Elena took one of the pistols, checked the chamber, and tested the weight with the easy familiarity of someone who'd grown up around guns. My father taught me, before Blackwood took everything. Good. You're our rear guard. Anything goes wrong, you hold them off while the others run. I won't leave anyone behind. You will if I tell you to. This only works if someone survives to tell the story. Understand? Elena's jaw set, but she nodded. Jack handed the second pistol to Maggie. You know how to use this. I'll learn fast. Over the next hour, Jack taught Maggie the basics. How to aim, how to breathe, how to not panic when the noise and the recoil made your whole body want to flinch. She was a natural student, smart, focused, willing to practice the same movement 50 times until it became automatic. When Sally and Jack left to scout the compound, Maggie was dry-firing the pistol over and over, building muscle memory. Becca watched her with something like awe. The ride to Blackwood's compound took 40 minutes through heavy snow. Jack and Sally stayed off the main roads, cutting through forest and ravine to avoid being seen. Sally guided them with the confidence of someone who'd made this journey in the dark before running for her life. They left the horses tied in a copse of trees half a mile out and continued on foot. Sally moved like a ghost through the snow, and Jack found himself impressed despite everything. This woman had survived things that would have broken most men. They all had. The compound sat in a natural bowl protected on 3 sides by steep hillsides. Smart positioning, easy to defend, hard to attack. A 10-foot wooden wall surrounded the main buildings. Jack counted 6 guard towers, but only 3 were manned. Budget cuts or overconfidence. Either worked in their favor. There. Sally pointed to the eastern wall. That's where the women's quarters are. The door locks from the outside. 2 guards, like I said. Jack studied the guards through his spyglass. Young men bored, stamping their feet against the cold. They weren't expecting trouble. Why would they? They worked for the most powerful man in the territory. The main house. Center of the compound. That's where Blackwood and Victor sleep. Blackwood's office is on the 2nd floor corner room facing east. The ledgers are in a safe behind his desk. You know the combination. No, but I know where he hides the key, under a loose floorboard near the window. Jack smiled despite himself. You're full of surprises. I cleaned that office for 3 years. He never once looked at me long enough to think I might be paying attention. They watched for another hour, timing guard rotations, noting weak points, memorizing every detail that might mean the difference between rescue and massacre. When Jack was satisfied, they moved back to the horses. The ride back was quiet. Sally seemed lost in thought, and Jack didn't disturb her. He was running the plan through his mind, looking for flaws, finding dozens, but knowing they were committed now. At the church, Elena had turned the main sanctuary into a training ground. She'd taught Maggie and Becca how to move silently across the creaking floorboards, how to use shadows, how to communicate without speaking. Basic skills, but skills that could save lives. Jack gathered them all together as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. 8 hours until we move. We're going to spend the next 6 drilling every part of this plan until you can do it in your sleep. Then we rest for 2 hours. Then we ride. And you're meeting with Blackwood? Maggie asked. I'm not going. By the time he realizes that we'll already be inside his compound. Becca spoke up, her voice small. What if we fail? What if we can't get them out? Jack knelt in front of her so they were eye level. Then we die trying, but we don't fail. We don't get to fail. 23 women are counting on us whether they know it or not. So we drill until we can't get it wrong. Understood? Understood. For the next 6 hours they practiced. Jack walked them through the plan step by step, then again, then again. They rehearsed hand signals, escape routes, contingencies for every disaster he could imagine. Elena proved to be a natural tactician, catching problems Jack missed. Sally's knowledge of the compound was invaluable. Maggie's quick thinking filled gaps in their planning, and Becca, despite her wounded hand and quiet nature, absorbed everything with fierce determination. By the time Jack called a halt, they were exhausted but ready. As ready as anyone could be for something this impossible. They ate in silence, jerky and hardtack that Jack had brought from his supplies. Not much, but enough. None of them had appetite anyway. Finally, with 2 hours left before they would ride, Jack told them to rest. They needed to be sharp for what came next. The women settled into corners of the church, wrapping themselves in blankets. But Jack saw that none of them slept. They stared at the ceiling, or at their hands, or at nothing, each of them wrestling with the knowledge that tonight they might die. Jack understood. He wasn't sleeping either. He stood at the broken window watching the sunset over Silver Ridge and thought about Emma. She'd believed in him. Even when he didn't believe in himself, she'd seen something worth loving, something heroic. "I hope you're right," he whispered to her ghost, "because I'm about to do something really stupid in your name." Behind him, Maggie stirred. She crossed the church and stood beside him at the window. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Don't need to. Adrenaline'll keep me sharp enough." "You're scared." "Terrified." She seemed surprised by his honesty. "But you're still going." "Being scared and being a coward aren't the same thing. I learned that too late to save my family. Maybe it's not too late to save yours." Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me about them, your wife and daughter." Jack's throat tightened. He never talked about them, but maybe tonight, facing what they were about to face, the words needed to be said. "Emma was Irish, like you. Met her in San Antonio when I was hunting a gang that had crossed the border. She was working in a hotel trying to earn passage money to bring her brother over from Dublin." He smiled at the memory. "I walked in looking for information and walked out 3 hours later knowing I was going to marry her. Sounds like her charm was even more impressive than mine. Different kind of charm. She had this way of seeing through all the walls people put up. She saw who I really was under the badge and the gun, and somehow she loved that person. Lily, our daughter, 6 years old when she died, smart as a whip, brave as a lion. She wanted to be a ranger like her daddy." His voice cracked. "I told her girls couldn't be rangers. She told me that was stupid and she was going to change the law when she grew up. She sounds wonderful." She was. They both were. Jack's hands clenched on the window frame. "I was tracking a gang, got word they were holed up in a farmhouse 2 days' ride from where Emma and Lily were staying. I thought they'd be safe. I thought I had time." He didn't need to say the rest. Maggie's hand found his shoulder. "It wasn't your fault." "Whose fault was it then? I was the ranger. I was supposed to protect people. I was supposed to protect them. You were one man against an entire gang. You can't save everyone." "I know. But I should have saved them." He turned to look at her. "That's why tonight matters. 23 women who are where Emma and Lily were trapped, scared, waiting for someone to come. This time I'm not arriving too late." Maggie's eyes shone with tears. "You're trying to save them all over again. Your wife and daughter." "Maybe. Does it matter why I'm doing it?" "No. It only matters that you are." She squeezed his shoulder. "But Jack, you need to know something. Whatever happens tonight, whether we succeed or fail, you're already different from the man who arrived too late 5 years ago. That man gave up. You didn't." Before Jack could respond, Sally called from across the church. "It's time." Jack checked his pocket watch. 10 o'clock. The compound would be settling in for the night. Guards would be tired. Blackwood would be wondering why Jack hadn't shown up for their meeting. Victor would be planning what he'd do to Jack when they caught him. Perfect. The 4 women gathered around him. In the moonlight streaming through the broken windows, they looked like warrior spirits, battered but unbroken, scared but determined. Each of them had been beaten down by life, by Blackwood, by a system designed to grind them into dust. But they were still standing, still fighting. Jack met each of their eyes in turn. "Last chance to back out. I won't think less of any of you." No one moved. "All right then, let's go save some lives." They rode through the night toward Blackwood's compound, 4 broken women and 1 haunted man carrying weapons and hope, and the desperate belief that sometimes the impossible was just another word for necessary. The stars overhead were cold and bright. The snow beneath their horses' hooves was marked with the tracks of their passage. And somewhere ahead, 23 women waited in the darkness, not knowing that rescue was coming, or that it might arrive too late. They left the horses tied in the same copse of trees where Jack and Sally had hidden earlier that day. Becca stayed with them, her good hand gripping the reins, her wounded one pressed against her chest. She looked small in the moonlight, a girl playing at being a soldier, but her eyes were old. "You hear gunfire, you ride for Denver," Jack told her. "Don't wait for us. Don't come back. Just ride." "I'll wait 1 hour," Becca said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "If you're not back by then, I'll assume the worst and go." Jack wanted to argue, but didn't. An hour was reasonable, more than reasonable. If they weren't out in an hour, they were probably dead. He turned to the other 3. Sally had her face painted with mud to hide the pale skin. Elena had tied her hair back tight, every movement economical and controlled. Maggie held the pistol Jack had given her like it was a snake that might bite, but her finger was off the trigger and her grip was solid. They'd learned fast. They'd have to. "Remember the plan," Jack said. "We go in quiet. We get the women. We get the ledgers. We get out. No heroes, no revenge. We're here to save lives, not take them." "Unless we have to," Elena added. "Unless we have to." Jack agreed. They moved through the snow toward the compound. The moon was bright enough to see by, but not so bright they'd cast shadows. Jack kept them to the low ground, using the terrain for cover, stopping every 50 yards to listen. Nothing. Just wind and the distant sound of a guard coughing in one of the towers. When they reached the tree line overlooking the compound, Jack pulled them down into a crouch. From here they could see the entire layout. 3 guard towers manned. 2 guards at the women's quarters door. Lights on in the main house where Blackwood and Victor slept. Sally pointed to a section of the eastern wall where the wood was darker than the rest. "That board's loose. I loosened it myself 6 months ago thinking I might escape. Never got the nerve." "You got it now," Jack said. They waited another 10 minutes, timing the guard rotation. The pattern Sally had described held true. Every 15 minutes, 2 guards walked the perimeter. They'd just passed the eastern wall, which meant they had 14 minutes before they came around again. Plenty of time if nothing went wrong. Everything always went wrong. Jack led them across the open ground in a low run. They reached the wall without being seen. Sally found the loose board and pulled. It came free with a soft creak that sounded like thunder in the quiet night. One by one they slipped through. Inside the compound, everything was different. The space felt smaller, more oppressive. Jack could smell smoke from the main house chimney, and beneath that, something worse. Fear. Desperation. The smell of too many people living in too small a space with no hope of escape. Sally gestured toward the women's quarters. 2 guards stood outside talking in low voices. One of them laughed at something the other said. They looked relaxed. Bored. Jack pulled the women into a huddle. "Elena, you and Sally take the guards. Quiet. No shots unless absolutely necessary. Maggie and I will get the door open and start moving the women out. Questions." "What if they don't come quiet?" Elena whispered. "Then we gag them if we have to. We don't have time for explanations or debates. They either trust us or they don't." The women nodded. Jack checked his knife one more time, then gestured for Elena and Sally to move. They split up, circling around opposite sides of the building. Jack watched them go, these two women who'd been slaves yesterday and soldiers tonight. Part of him wanted to call them back, to tell them this was insane, that they should run while they still could. But they wouldn't run. Not anymore. Blackwood had taken that option away from them the day he'd bought their lives with paperwork and lies. Sally reached her guard first. She moved like smoke, silent and sudden. Her hand clamped over his mouth, and Jack's knife, borrowed for the night, went across his throat. Not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to make him understand that screaming meant dying. The guard went still. Sally dragged him backward into the shadows. Elena's approach was different. She walked right up to her guard, like she belonged there, like she was supposed to be making rounds. The guard turned his mouth, opening to ask a question, and Elena's fist drove into his solar plexus. The air went out of him in a rush. Before he could recover, she had her pistol pressed against his spine. "Make a sound, and I'll put a bullet through your kidney," she whispered. "Nod if you understand." The guard nodded. Jack and Maggie moved forward. The door to the women's quarters was locked with a heavy padlock. Jack pulled out the tools he'd brought from his forge, thin pieces of metal that he used for delicate work. He'd been a ranger long enough to learn how to pick locks. His hands shook as he worked, not from fear, from rage. This lock kept 23 women imprisoned. This lock was the physical manifestation of everything wrong with men like Blackwood. Legal slavery dressed up in contracts and commerce. The lock clicked open. Jack pulled the door wide and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Unwashed bodies. Sickness, despair. Then his eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he saw them. 23 women packed into a room meant for maybe 10. They slept on rough pallets, some sharing blankets because there weren't enough to go around. Ages ranged from maybe 16 to 40. White, Mexican, Chinese, Native American. Blackwood was an equal opportunity slaver. The nearest woman woke when the door opened. Her eyes went wide with terror. She opened her mouth to scream. Maggie was faster. She crossed the room in 3 strides and clamped her hand over the woman's mouth. "Sarah Mitchell, don't scream. It's me. It's Maggie Brennan. We came to get you out." Recognition flooded Sarah's face. Then confusion. Then hope so desperate it was painful to see. "Maggie." Her voice was a whisper. "But you escaped. You got out. And now we're getting you out. All of you. But you have to be quiet and you have to move fast. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded. She was already waking the women next to her, passing the message in urgent whispers. They woke like dominoes, falling one after another, until all 23 were conscious and staring at Maggie and Jack like they were hallucinations. "Who's he?" one woman asked, eyeing Jack with suspicion. "Our way out. Jack Hartwell. He's going to get us to safety." "Why would he help us?" Another voice, sharp with distrust. These women had been betrayed by men too many times. They weren't going to trust easy. "Because I asked him to," Maggie said. "And because he's not like them. But we don't have time for this. Blackwood's men could discover us any second. Everyone who can walk, stand up. Anyone who's injured or too weak, say so now." 5 women raised their hands. Jack's heart sank. 5 was too many to carry. They'd slow everything down. But leaving them wasn't an option. "We'll manage," he said. "Everyone pair up, strong with weak. We move together or not at all." The women organized themselves with surprising speed. Years of Blackwood's control had taught them to follow orders without question. That would help tonight, even if the thought made Jack's stomach turn. Sally appeared in the doorway. "Guards are secured, but we've got maybe 10 minutes before someone notices they're missing. Then we move now, single file, no talking. If you see a guard, drop flat, and don't move until I signal." They filed out into the night. 23 women plus the 3 who'd come to rescue them. 26 souls moving through the compound like ghosts. Jack took point with Sally beside him. Elena brought up the rear with Maggie in the middle, her pistol held ready but hidden beneath her coat. They made it 20 yards before the first complication. A door opened in the main house. Victor Drummond stepped out smoking a cigarette. He stood on the porch for a moment, his back to them, exhaling smoke into the cold air. Jack raised his fist. Everyone stopped. They were exposed in the open ground between buildings. If Victor turned around, if he saw them, it was over. Victor took another drag on his cigarette, flicked ash into the snow. Jack's hand moved to his knife. If Victor turned, Jack would have to kill him. No choice. The man was too dangerous to leave conscious. But Victor didn't turn. He finished his cigarette, ground it out under his heel, and went back inside. The door closed. Jack waited 10 more seconds, then gestured forward. They moved. The loose board in the wall was 30 yards away, then 20, then 10. Jack could see Becca through the gap holding the horses, her face tight with worry. They were going to make it. Against all odds, against every reasonable expectation, they were actually going to make it. That's when the alarm bell started ringing. Someone had found the guards, or noticed the empty women's quarters, or just gotten lucky with timing. Didn't matter. The compound exploded into motion. Lights blazed in every building. Men shouted. Doors slammed open. Guards poured out of the barracks like angry hornets. "Run!" Jack shouted. No point in stealth now. Everyone through the wall. Move! The women ran. Some of them were crying. Others were silent with terror. But they ran. Jack and Sally held position at the wall, pushing women through the gap as fast as they could. Elena stood 10 feet away, her pistol drawn, covering the approach from the barracks. Blackwood's men rounded the corner of the main building, 5 of them armed with rifles. They saw the women fleeing and raised their weapons. Elena fired first. Her shot went wide, but it made them duck. That was enough. 2 more women made it through the wall. "Elena, go!" Jack shouted. But she didn't go. She stood her ground and fired again. This time her aim was true. One of the guards went down, clutching his shoulder. The others returned fire. Bullets punched through the air where Elena had been standing. She dove behind a water trough, wood splinters exploding around her. Maggie pulled 2 more women through the wall. "Jack, we have to go. There's too many." She was right. More guards were coming from every direction. Jack could see Victor in the distance, rallying men pointing toward the breach in the wall. 8 women left to evacuate. Then 7. Then 6. Elena's pistol clicked empty. She fumbled for the spare ammunition Jack had given her, but the guards saw their opportunity and charged. Jack left the wall and ran toward her. He had his rifle up and firing before his conscious mind registered the decision. The first shot dropped a guard at 20 yards. The second missed. The third hit another man in the leg. But there were too many. For every one Jack stopped, 2 more appeared. "Elena, fall back." He reached her position and grabbed her arm. They ran together back toward the wall. A bullet cracked past Jack's ear. Another hit the ground at his feet. He shoved Elena ahead of him, using his body to shield hers. If one of them was going to take a bullet, it would be him. They reached the wall. Sally pulled Elena through. Jack turned to cover their escape. Victor was there, 50 yards away but closing fast. He had a rifle and murder in his eyes. Jack raised his own rifle. They fired simultaneously. Victor's shot went wide. Jack's didn't. It caught Victor in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The man went down hard, but he wasn't dead. Already he was getting back up, his face twisted with rage. "Jack, come on!" Maggie's voice from the other side of the wall. But Jack couldn't move. He was staring at Victor, at this man who'd tortured and terrorized the women Jack was trying to save. Everything in him wanted to finish it, to put Victor down permanent, so he could never hurt anyone again. Emma's voice in his memory. "Don't ever let yourself become the thing you're fighting against." Jack lowered his rifle and dove through the gap in the wall. Becca had the horses ready. 26 women and not enough horses. They'd have to double up, maybe triple. Some would have to run. "Everyone mount up." Jack was already lifting women onto horses. "Double if you have to. We ride for the tree line and we don't stop." Gunfire erupted from inside the compound. Bullets punched through the wooden wall. One of the women cried out, hit in the arm, but still standing. "Go! Go!" Jack slapped the nearest horse on the rump and it bolted toward the trees. Another followed, then another. Jack swung up onto his roan with Sally behind him and Maggie clinging to the saddle horn. Elena rode solo on Becca's horse while Becca doubled with two other women. They rode like hell itself was chasing them. Because it was. Behind them the compound gate crashed open and riders poured out. Blackwood's voice rose above the chaos, screaming orders Jack couldn't make out over the thunder of hooves. The tree line was 100 yards away, then 50. Bullets whipped through the air around them. One of the horses screamed and went down, throwing its riders into the snow. Jack wheeled his horse around. "Sally, take the reins, Maggie, help those women." He jumped down and ran back toward the fallen riders. Two women lay dazed in the snow. The horse wasn't getting back up. Jack grabbed both women, one under each arm, and ran. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. Behind him, Blackwood's riders were gaining. Elena rode past him, leaned down, and extended her hand. "Grab on." Jack shoved one woman toward Elena's horse. She caught the woman's wrist and hauled her up behind her. Jack kept running with the second woman. A rider was almost on top of them. Jack could see his face, young, scared, but committed. The man raised his rifle. Maggie's shot took him in the chest. She'd circled back her pistol, smoking. The rider toppled from his horse. Jack reached Sally and his roan. He threw the woman up onto the horse, then vaulted up himself. Ride. They crashed into the trees. Branches slapped at them. Snow showered down. Behind them the pursuit continued, but the forest slowed the riders. Some of Blackwood's men had to dismount to navigate the thick undergrowth. Jack's group had the advantage. They knew where they were going. Denver. 4 days hard riding with Blackwood's entire force hunting them. 4 days to survive. They rode for an hour before Jack called a halt. His roan was lathered with sweat despite the cold. The other horses were no better. They needed rest or they'd founder. The women dismounted in a small clearing. Some collapsed immediately, exhausted beyond endurance. Others stood guard holding rocks or sticks since they had no weapons. Even after everything, they weren't giving up. Jack did a quick head count. 26. Everyone had made it out. Miracle of miracles, they hadn't lost anyone. But the woman who'd been shot was bleeding badly. Maggie was already tending to her, using strips torn from her own dress to bandage the wound. "How bad?" Jack asked quietly. "Bad enough. Bullet went through, but it hit muscle. She needs a doctor." "Denver's 4 days away." "I know." Maggie's eyes were haunted. "I know, Jack." Sally appeared beside them. "Blackwood's men pulled back, but they'll regroup. Come at us with full force in the daylight." "How many, you think?" "All of them. 20, maybe 30 riders. He can't let us get away. If we reach Denver with those ledgers and these women, his whole operation crumbles." Jack nodded slowly. He'd known this was coming. You didn't embarrass a man like Blackwood and walk away clean. "Then we don't stop. We ride through the night, rest the horses during the day, in places they can't find us. We keep moving until we hit Denver or die trying." Elena joined them. Her face was grim. "I killed a man back there. Shot him off his horse." "You saved our lives," Jack said. "I still killed him." Her voice was hollow. "I looked him in the eye and pulled the trigger. He was maybe 20 years old. He would have killed you, all of us." "I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier." She looked at Jack. "How do you live with it? The killing?" Jack thought about the 6 men he'd killed 5 years ago, about how their faces still haunted his dreams, about how some stains never washed out no matter how hard you scrubbed. "You don't," he said honestly. "You just learn to carry it." One of the rescued women approached. She was older than the others, maybe 35, with gray already threading her dark hair. Her name was Catherine, and she'd been in Blackwood's compound longer than anyone. Mr. Hartwell, the women want to thank you, all of you, for what you did tonight. Save the thanks for Denver. We're not safe yet. I know, but they need to hear this from someone. You gave us something we thought we'd never have again. You gave us a choice. Win or lose, live or die, we get to choose our own fate now. That matters more than you know. Jack met her eyes and saw strength there. This woman had survived years of Blackwood's cruelty and come out unbroken. She and all the others. They weren't victims. Not anymore. Can you ride? He asked. We can do whatever we have to do. Then we ride. 5 minutes rest, then we move again. Catherine nodded and went to rally the others. Jack watched her go and felt something shift in his chest. These women didn't need saving. They needed support. An ally. Someone who believed they were worth fighting for, that he could be. Maggie found him as they were preparing to mount up again. Jack, we need to talk about the ledgers. He'd almost forgotten. In the chaos of the escape, the whole reason they'd risked this mission had been left behind. We didn't get them. I know, but we need them. Without proof of what Blackwood's done, it's our word against his, and our word doesn't carry much weight. She was right. 26 women with no documentation, no legal standing, claiming a respected businessman had enslaved them. The town council would laugh them out of the territory. The ledgers are in his office, Jack said. Behind enemy lines, surrounded by men who want us dead. I know where they are. I know how to get to them. Maggie. I'm not suggesting we all go back. Just me. Small, fast, in and out before they know I'm there. Absolutely not. Jack, without those ledgers. Without you, these women lose the person they trust most. You're their leader. They follow you. I'm not risking that. Maggie's jaw set. Then come with me. You and me. Sally and Elena can lead the others to Denver. We circle back, get the ledgers, catch up. Jack wanted to say no. Every tactical instinct screamed that splitting their forces was suicide. But Maggie was right. They needed proof. They needed documentation that would stand up in a federal court. If we do this, Jack said slowly, we do it smart. We wait until Blackwood's men commit to chasing the main group. Then we slip back while they're looking the other direction. So we're doing it. Jack looked at the 26 women preparing to ride. Women who'd put their trust in him. Women who deserved justice, not just survival. Yeah, he said. We're doing it. Sally didn't like the plan. Elena liked it even less. But they accepted it because they understood what was at stake. You've got 3 days to catch up, Sally told Jack. After that, we can't wait. We have to get these women to Denver before Blackwood runs us down. 3 days is plenty. We'll be there. Sally pulled him aside while the others prepared. Jack, if something happens to you and Maggie, if Blackwood catches you, he won't. But if he does, what should I tell these women? They're going to ask why you went back. They're going to want to know you didn't die for nothing. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, tell them we went back because their freedom was worth fighting for. Because every woman in that compound mattered enough to risk everything. Tell them that. Sally nodded. Her eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. Don't get dead, Jack. These women need heroes right now. And whether you like it or not, that's what you are. The group split 10 minutes later. Sally led 24 women northwest toward Denver. Jack and Maggie waited in the trees, watching them disappear into the darkness. When they were gone, Maggie turned to Jack. Think they'll make it? If anyone can get them there, Sally can. She's tougher than steel. So are you. Jack didn't respond to that. He was too busy thinking about what came next. Riding back into hell for a book of numbers. It should have felt stupid. Instead, it felt necessary. They rode in silence back toward Blackwood's compound. The snow had started falling again, covering their tracks, hiding their passage. Good and bad. Good because Blackwood's men couldn't track them. Bad because they couldn't see danger until they were right on top of it. An hour later, they crested a ridge overlooking the compound. It blazed with light. Every lamp and torch had been lit. Men swarmed the grounds like ants. In the center of it all stood Blackwood himself, a dark figure directing the chaos. "He's organizing search parties," Maggie whispered. "Sending them in every direction. Which means the compound will be nearly empty. Most of his men will be out hunting. Most isn't all. No, but it's better odds than we had earlier." They waited 2 more hours, watching riders leave the compound in groups of 3 and 4. Each group headed in a different direction. Northeast, northwest, due north. Blackwood was casting a wide net, hoping to catch his escapees before they reached safety. Finally, when the compound had quieted to maybe 8 or 10 men remaining, Jack and Maggie made their move. They left the horses tied outside the tree line and approached on foot. The loose board was still loose. No one had repaired it yet. They slipped through without incident. Inside, everything felt different. Earlier it had been oppressive. Now it felt abandoned. Most of the buildings were dark. The women's quarters stood empty, its door hanging open like a mouth screaming silently. Blackwood's office was on the 2nd floor of the main house. They'd have to cross open ground, enter through the front door or a window, and navigate upstairs without being seen or heard. Simple, except for all the ways it could go catastrophically wrong. They reached the main house without incident. Jack checked the front door. Locked. The windows on the ground floor were shuttered from inside. "Around back," Maggie whispered. "There's a kitchen entrance. Servants use it, usually unlocked." They circled the building. The kitchen door was indeed unlocked. Jack eased it open, every sense alert for signs of danger. The kitchen was empty. Beyond it they could hear voices, men talking in low tones. Blackwood's remaining guards probably discussing what had happened, how badly they'd failed. Jack and Maggie moved through the kitchen like ghosts. They reached the main hallway and paused. The stairs were 20 feet away. Between them and the stairs were 3 men sitting around a table playing cards. No way to reach the stairs without being seen. Jack pulled Maggie back into the kitchen. "We need a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" He looked around the kitchen. Pots, pans, a stove still warm from dinner. An idea formed. "Can you light a fire?" "What?" "Not a big one. Just enough smoke to get them out of the house for a minute." Maggie stared at him. "You want to burn down Blackwood's house?" "I want to make them think it's burning down, long enough for us to get upstairs." She considered it, then nodded. "Oil lamp. Break it near the stove. The oil will catch fast, but not spread far. Lots of smoke, though." Jack found the lamp. Maggie opened the stove door. Together they staged what would look like an accident. A lamp knocked over oil, spilling flames catching. Then they lit it and ran back into the shadows. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Smoke billowed out of the kitchen. Within seconds, the alarm was raised. The men at the card table jumped up shouting for water. They rushed toward the kitchen. Jack and Maggie sprinted for the stairs. They made it to the 2nd floor before anyone noticed. Behind them, the men were fighting the fire with buckets and blankets. It would take them maybe 5 minutes to realize the fire was small and contained. 5 minutes to find the ledgers and get out. Blackwood's office was exactly where Maggie had said. Corner room, eastern exposure. The door was locked, but Jack's lockpicks made short work of it. Inside the room was exactly what Jack expected from a man like Blackwood. Rich furniture, expensive art. Everything designed to project power and respectability. The safe was behind the desk, just as Maggie had described. Jack moved to the window and found the loose floorboard. Underneath was a key. He's arrogant enough to keep the key this close. Jack couldn't believe it. He never thought anyone would dare rob him. Who would be stupid enough? Us, apparently. Jack opened the safe. Inside were stacks of papers, bags of coins, and 3 leather-bound ledgers. He grabbed all 3 and shoved them into the pack Maggie carried. "Got them. Let's go." They were halfway to the door when they heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful, coming closer. Jack looked around frantically. No second exit. One window that opened onto a 2-story drop, and a door that was about to open to reveal whoever was in the hallway. Maggie grabbed his arm and pulled him toward a large wardrobe in the corner. They squeezed inside, pulling the door shut just as the office door opened. Through the gap in the wardrobe doors, Jack saw who'd entered. Clayton Blackwood himself. The man looked like hell. His expensive clothes were disheveled. His face was haggard with rage and exhaustion. He moved to his desk and slammed his fist down hard enough to rattle the lamp. 23 women. 23. Gone. Years of work. Thousands of dollars. Gone in one night because of one interfering blacksmith and 4 ungrateful whores. Another voice spoke. Victor Drummond, his shoulder bandaged where Jack's bullet had hit him. "We'll get them back, boss. They can't have gone far. And when we do, I'll make them wish they'd died in that compound." "You'll do nothing," Blackwood snapped. "You let them escape. You and your incompetent guards. I should fire the lot of you." It was that Hartwell. He had military training. "None of my men expected. I don't care what they expected. I care about results." Blackwood paced. "Those women are witnesses. If they reach a federal marshal, if they testify about what goes on here, we're finished. All of us. What about the town council, the marshal? They're on our payroll. Local authorities mean nothing if the federals get involved. We need those women dead before they can talk. All of them. Especially that Irish bitch Maggie Brennan. She's smart. She's organized. She's dangerous." Inside the wardrobe, Jack felt Maggie tense. He put a hand on her arm. "Steady. Wait." Blackwood moved to his safe. Jack's heart dropped. If he opened it, if he saw the ledgers were gone. But Blackwood didn't open it. He just stood there, staring at it, like it contained all his dreams and nightmares. "Everything I've built," he said quietly. "Everything I've accomplished. 20 years of work. It can't end like this. It won't." "So what do we do?" Victor asked. "We kill them all. Every last one. We send riders in every direction. We pay every tracker and bounty hunter in the territory. We offer $1,000 per woman, dead or alive. And when we find them, we make an example so horrific that no one ever dares cross me again." Victor's smile was cruel. "Now you're talking sense, boss." They left the office together, still discussing their plans for murder and revenge. Jack and Maggie waited until their footsteps faded down the hall. Then they climbed out of the wardrobe. "We need to go," Maggie whispered. "Right now." But Jack was staring at the safe. At this symbol of everything Blackwood had stolen and destroyed. An idea formed in his mind. Probably stupid. Definitely dangerous. "Jack, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we don't just take the ledgers. We take everything. His money, his documents, everything that gives him power. There's no time. We make time. Sally and those women need as much head start as we can give them. If Blackwood wakes up tomorrow and finds his entire operation gutted, he'll be too busy trying to salvage things to chase them immediately." Maggie stared at him. Then slowly she smiled. "You're actually crazy. You know that?" "Yeah, I figured that out around the time I let 4 desperate women into my cabin." They emptied the safe. Cash contracts, property deeds, correspondence. Everything went into Maggie's pack until it was bulging. Then Jack did something that 5 years ago would have seemed impossible. He took out a match. Maggie's eyes went wide. "Jack, no. The smoke will bring everyone." "That's the idea. While they're fighting the fire, we slip out the back. By the time they realize what burned, we'll be miles away." He didn't wait for her to argue. He struck the match and touched it to the pile of papers still in the safe. They caught immediately, dry and eager. Then Jack and Maggie ran. They made it out the kitchen door as smoke began pouring from Blackwood's office window. Shouts rose behind them. Men running, bells ringing. They reached the horses and rode hard into the darkness, the smell of burning paper following them like a promise of justice. Behind them, Clayton Blackwood's empire was going up in smoke. Ahead of them, 24 women were riding toward freedom. And somewhere in between, Jack Hartwell felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. They rode until dawn painted the eastern sky the color of blood and bruises. Jack's roan was stumbling with exhaustion. Maggie slumped against his back, half asleep in the saddle, the pack of stolen ledgers pressed between them like a promise they had to keep. When they finally stopped in a ravine choked with pine trees, Maggie slid off the horse and collapsed into the snow. She didn't get up, just lay there breathing hard, staring at the lightening sky through the branches overhead. Jack dismounted more carefully. His body ached in places he'd forgotten could hurt. 5 years of working a forge kept a man strong, but it didn't prepare him for riding all night after fighting half of Blackwood's men and burning down their boss's office. "We should keep moving," Maggie said without moving. "They'll be tracking us by now." "Let them track. We need rest or we'll fall out of the saddle and break our necks." Jack pulled the pack off her shoulders and set it aside. The leather was scorched in one corner where a spark from Blackwood's office had caught it. They'd been that close to losing everything. He built a small fire knowing it was risky, but needing it anyway. The cold was the kind that got into your bones and didn't leave. The kind that made you stupid and slow. They couldn't afford either. While the fire caught, Jack examined the ledgers. 3 books, each one meticulously kept. The first contained names and purchase prices. Margaret Brennan, $3,000 acquired via debt assumption from the Callahan family, Boston. Sarah Chen, $1,800 debt inherited from father, San Francisco. The list went on. 23 women, each one reduced to a number and a transaction. The second ledger was even worse. It detailed income. How much each woman earned through labor, how much through prostitution, how much Blackwood kept versus how much he paid his guards and suppliers. The numbers were staggering. In the past year alone, Blackwood had cleared over $30,000. The third ledger was the one that would hang him. Bribes. Names of officials who took money to look the other way. Marshall Gibbs received $200 monthly. 3 town council members got $50 each. Even the territorial judge received payments disguised as consulting fees. "This is everything," Jack said quietly. "This is proof of the whole operation." Maggie had crawled closer to the fire. She took the ledger Jack offered and read through it with eyes that grew harder with each page. He wrote it all down, every crime, every woman, every bribe. He was so confident no one would ever challenge him that he documented everything. Arrogance. It's killed better men than Blackwood. Is he dead? Maggie looked up from the ledger. The fire. Did we kill him? Jack had been asking himself the same question. The fire had started in the safe in an enclosed space. It might have spread slowly or exploded fast. Blackwood might have gotten out or been trapped inside. There was no way to know. Don't know. But even if he survived, his operation is crippled. His records are gone. His money is gone. We just cut the head off a snake that's been poisoning this territory for 20 years. Snakes can live without their heads for a while, long enough to bite. She wasn't wrong. Jack had seen plenty of desperate men do terrible things in their final moments. If Blackwood was alive, and if he knew Jack and Maggie had taken everything from him, he'd be beyond reason, beyond mercy. He'd want blood. Then we don't give him time to strike, Jack said. We rest for 2 hours. Then we ride hard for Denver. 3 days to catch up with Sally and the others. 3 days to stay ahead of whatever's chasing us. Maggie nodded. She was already settling down near the fire, using the pack of ledgers as a pillow. Her eyes closed almost immediately. Jack took first watch. He sat with his back against a tree and his rifle across his knees, listening to the forest wake up around them. Birds started singing. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked under the weight of snow. Normal sounds. Nothing that suggested pursuit. But Jack knew better than to trust normal. Blackwood's men were out there somewhere. Maybe far behind. Maybe closer than he wanted to think about. Either way, they were coming. He thought about Emma. About what she'd say if she could see him now. Probably something about being an idiot for risking his life for people he barely knew. But she'd be proud too. Emma had always believed people were worth saving. Even when Jack had lost that faith, she'd kept it for both of them. "I'm trying," he whispered to her ghost. "I'm trying to be the man you thought I was." Maggie stirred in her sleep, mumbling something Jack couldn't make out. She looked younger, asleep. Less like a woman who'd survived 5 years of hell, and more like the girl from Ireland who'd believed in America's promises. Jack wondered if she'd ever feel that hope again, or if Blackwood had taken it permanently. 2 hours passed. Jack woke Maggie gently. She came alert instantly, hand reaching for the pistol she'd tucked into her belt. Years of sleeping light in Blackwood's compound had taught her to wake ready for danger. "Time to ride," Jack said. "We've got ground to cover." They mounted up and pushed northwest toward Denver. The terrain was getting rougher. Mountains rose around them like walls, their peaks white with snow that never melted. The trees grew thicker, the valleys deeper. Good for hiding, bad for making time. Around noon they stopped at a creek to water the horses and refill their canteens. While the animals drank, Jack studied their back trail. Nothing obvious. But that didn't mean they weren't being followed. "How far behind do you think they are?" Maggie asked, reading his thoughts. "Depends on how long it took them to put out the fire and figure out what we took. Could be hours. Could be right on top of us." Cheerful thought. "You want me to lie?" "No, I've had enough lies to last a lifetime." She splashed cold water on her face, washing away the soot and exhaustion as best she could. "Jack, what happens when we reach Denver?" "Assuming we reach Denver." "We find Marshal Thornton. We give him the ledgers. He arrests Blackwood and everyone on his payroll. And then you and the others are free." "Free?" Maggie tested the word like it was foreign. "I've been thinking about that. What freedom actually means. 5 years ago I thought it meant not owing anybody anything. Being able to go where I wanted, do what I wanted. Now I don't know. Those women we rescued, they're free from Blackwood. But they've got nowhere to go. No money, no papers. Most of them can't even prove they're who they say they are." Jack hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd been so focused on getting them out, getting them to safety, that he hadn't considered what came after safety. "One problem at a time," he said finally. "First we survive. Then we figure out the rest." "That's not a plan." "No. But it's all I've got." Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When this is over, when Blackwood's in prison or dead, I'm going back to Silver Ridge. I'm going to rebuild, help other women who end up where I was, make sure they have options I didn't have." "That's dangerous. Blackwood's not the only man running operations like his." "I know, but someone has to fight back. Might as well be someone who understands what it's like." She looked at Jack. "What about you? What will you do when this is over?" Jack didn't have an answer. He'd spent 5 years not thinking about the future, not planning beyond the next horseshoe or the next meal. The idea of a future of something beyond survival felt foreign. "Don't know," he admitted. "Haven't thought that far." "Well, think about it. Because these women need more than rescue. They need someone they can trust. Someone who will stand between them and the world when the world tries to hurt them again." She put a hand on his arm. "They need you, Jack. I need you." Before he could respond, the horse's ears pricked forward, alert, nervous. Jack's hand went to his rifle. "Get behind the rocks, now." Maggie moved fast and quiet. Jack followed, pulling the horses with him. They crouched behind a cluster of boulders and waited. 3 riders appeared on the trail they'd just left. Blackwood's men. They moved slowly, studying the ground, following tracks. When they reached the creek, they stopped. "Trail's fresh," one of them called. "Maybe an hour old. They stopped here." Which way did they go? The tracker dismounted and circled the area. Jack watched him work professional and thorough. This wasn't some random guard. This was someone who knew what he was doing. The tracker pointed northwest. That way. Moving fast. They're making for Denver. How far ahead? Not far. We can catch them before nightfall if we push. The three men remounted and kicked their horses into a gallop. They passed within 30 yards of where Jack and Maggie hid close enough that Jack could see their faces. Young men. Hard men. Men who'd kill without hesitation if Blackwood ordered it. When they were gone, Maggie let out a breath. They're ahead of us now. I know. So what do we do? They're between us and Sally's group. Jack's mind raced through options. They could turn back, find another route, but that would cost time they didn't have. They could try to go around, but the mountains funneled all traffic through a handful of passes. Those men would be watching those passes. Or they could do something stupid. We follow them, Jack said. What? They're tracking Sally's group. That means they'll lead us right to them. We stay far enough back they don't spot us close enough. We don't lose them. When they make their move on Sally and the others, we hit them from behind. That's insane. 3 armed men against the 2 of us. 3 men focused on 24 women won't be watching their backs. We'll have surprise. Maggie stared at him. You're serious? You have a better idea. She didn't. They both knew it. The only way forward was through danger. There was no safe path anymore. Maybe there never had been. They mounted up and followed at a distance. The 3 riders were moving fast, confident they were closing in on their prey. That confidence would be their weakness. Men who thought they'd already won stopped being careful. The day wore on. The sun arced across the sky and began its descent toward the western peaks. Jack's stomach growled. They hadn't eaten since the night before. But hunger was just another discomfort to ignore. He'd been a ranger long enough to know how to push past pain and exhaustion. Around 4 o'clock, the riders ahead stopped suddenly. One of them pointed. Jack squinted against the afternoon glare and saw what they'd seen. Smoke. A campfire. Sally and the others had stopped to rest. Jack's heart sank. They were exposed, vulnerable, and 3 of Blackwood's men were about to ride down on them. We need to warn them, Maggie whispered urgently. We will, by taking care of those 3 before they reach the camp. How? Jack studied the terrain. The trail wound through a narrow canyon before opening into the valley where Sally's camp sat. If he and Maggie could get ahead of the riders, could position themselves on the canyon walls. Can you shoot from horseback? He asked Maggie. I've never tried. Can you shoot from a high position at a target below? Maybe, if the target's close enough. It'll be close, trust me. Jack explained the plan quickly. Maggie's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. They split up. She took the eastern canyon wall. He took the western. They left the horses tied and scrambled up the rocky slopes on foot. Jack reached his position with minutes to spare. He could see Maggie across the canyon, crouched behind a boulder with her pistol drawn. Below, the 3 riders entered the canyon at a trot. They were talking relaxed, already imagining the bonus Blackwood would pay for recapturing the women. Jack let them get halfway through the canyon. Then he stood up. That's far enough. The riders pulled up hard. Their hands went to their weapons. The tracker who'd led them spotted Jack first. You're Hartwell, the blacksmith. That's right, and you're trespassing on my patience. Your patience? The man laughed. You burned down Mr. Blackwood's office, stole his property. You're a dead man, Hartwell. The only question is whether you die easy or hard. I vote easy, Jack said. You 3 turn around and ride back to Silver Ridge. Tell Blackwood his operation is over. Tell him if he's smart, he'll run before the federal marshals come for him. Or what? You'll shoot us. You're 1 man with 1 rifle. We're 3 with more bullets than you can dodge. True, Jack agreed. But you're forgetting something. What's that? I'm not alone. Maggie stood up across the canyon. Her pistol was aimed at the riders below. Her hands were steady despite the fear Jack knew she felt. The riders looked from Jack to Maggie and back. Calculating odds, 3 against 2. But 2 had high ground and cover. 3 were exposed in a canyon with walls on both sides. The tracker was smart enough to see how this ended. "Boys, easy now. We can talk about this." But one of the other riders wasn't as smart. Or maybe he was just angry. He yanked his rifle up and aimed at Jack. Jack fired first. The shot echoed through the canyon like thunder. The rider spun from his saddle and hit the ground hard. Maggie fired a heartbeat later. Her shot went wide, but it was close enough to make the second rider duck and lose his aim. His return shot sparked off the rocks near Maggie's position. Jack worked the lever on his rifle and fired again. This time he aimed for the horses. The animals panicked and bolted, carrying their riders back the way they'd come. One man managed to stay mounted. The other fell and had to scramble after his horse on foot. The tracker raised his hands. Hold fire, damn it!" Jack kept his rifle trained on the man. "You got something to say? Blackwood's alive. He survived the fire. And he's crazy with rage. He's put a bounty on all of you. $1,000 per woman. $5,000 for you personally. Good to know what I'm worth. You don't understand. He's not just sending his men. He's hiring every bounty hunter and outlaw in the territory. There's maybe 50 men hunting you right now. You can't fight all of them. Watch me. You're going to get those women killed. All of them. Is your pride worth that?" Jack's finger tightened on the trigger. This man had been tracking them to drag women back to slavery. He didn't get to lecture about who was putting lives at risk. But he was right about one thing. 50 men was too many to fight. "Get out of here," Jack said. "Tell Blackwood his bounty's not going to save him. Those ledgers are going to a federal marshal. His money can't buy his way out of what's coming." The tracker didn't wait for a second invitation. He ran after his horse, caught it, and rode back toward Silver Ridge like hell itself was chasing him. Maggie climbed down from her position. Her face was pale, but composed. "I almost killed a man. If my aim had been better, but it wasn't." And he rode away. "You did good." "I don't feel good. I feel sick." "That means you're still human. The day it stops making you sick is the day you should worry." They collected their horses and rode toward Sally's camp. The women there had heard the shooting and were armed with rocks and branches ready to defend themselves. When they saw Jack and Maggie, relief flooded their faces. Sally ran forward. "We thought you were dead. We heard the shots." "Blackwood's men," Jack explained. 3 of them. We sent them packing, but there's more coming, lots more. Blackwood's put bounties on all of us." Elena stepped forward, her face grim. "How many more?" 50, according to the tracker we let go." The women fell silent. 50 men. Against 26 women, most of them unarmed and weakened from years of captivity. The math was impossible. "Then we run," Catherine said. "We run faster, and we don't stop until we reach Denver." "We can't outrun 50 men," another woman said. Her voice shook. "Maybe we should surrender. Give ourselves up. At least we'd live." "To go back to Blackwood." Elena's voice was sharp. "I'd rather die free than live as his slave." Easy to say when you're not the one with a bullet in your future. Arguments broke out. Fear was spreading through the group like wildfire. Jack could see it happening. The fragile hope they'd been clinging to was crumbling under the weight of reality. Maggie climbed onto a fallen log so she could see everyone. "Listen to me. All of you. Listen." The arguments died down. The women turned to face her. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. We're being hunted by men who see us as property. Men who'd rather kill us than let us be free. The odds are against us. The world is against us. We might not make it to Denver alive." "Not helping Maggie," Sally muttered. But Maggie kept going. 5 days ago, we were slaves. We had no hope, no future. We'd accepted that we'd die in that compound. Then something changed. Jack gave us a choice: fight or surrender, run or accept our fate. And we chose to fight. We chose to run. We chose to believe that freedom was worth dying for. Her voice grew stronger. Now we're here, free, hunted, yes, exhausted, yes, scared out of our minds, yes, but free. We're standing here right now as free women because we refuse to accept that men like Blackwood get to decide our worth. And I don't know about you, but I'm not giving up that freedom without a fight. We're not soldiers, someone said. We don't know how to fight. Then we learn. Maggie turned to Jack. You were a Texas Ranger. You know how to fight. Teach us. Jack looked at the faces staring at him. 26 women who'd survived things that would have broken most men. They weren't soldiers, but neither were they helpless. All right, he said. We've got maybe 12 hours before Blackwood's bounty hunters find us. That's not enough time to make you into Rangers, but it's enough time to teach you how to not get killed. He spent the next hour showing them basics. How to hold a weapon, how to aim, how to move in groups so they covered each other, how to use terrain, how to make noise to confuse pursuers, how to run without leaving an obvious trail. The women learned fast. Fear was a powerful motivator. By the time full darkness fell, they were moving as a unit instead of a panicked mob. But Jack knew it wouldn't be enough. These women could learn tactics, could learn to shoot and fight. But they were still exhausted and malnourished and traumatized. Against 50 experienced bounty hunters, they'd be slaughtered. He pulled Sally, Elena, and Maggie aside while the others rested. We need to split up, he said quietly. What? Sally's voice rose. No, we stay together. If we stay together, we're one big target. They'll run us down like buffalo. But if we split into smaller groups, spread out across multiple trails, they'll still hunt us down, just slower. Maybe, but some of us might make it through. Right now, if we stick together, none of us make it. Elena shook her head. Jack's right. We need to divide. Give them too many trails to follow. Some groups will get caught, but others might slip through. I won't leave anyone behind, Sally said. You won't be leaving them. You'll be giving them a chance. Jack's voice was gentle but firm. This is triage. We save who we can. Maggie had been quiet. Now she spoke. 5 groups. 5 women each. We take different routes to Denver. The groups that make it, they go straight to Marshall Thornton with their stories. The groups that don't buy time for the others. Jack finished. The silence that followed was heavy. They were talking about sacrificing some to save others. It went against everything they'd fought for. But sometimes, survival required terrible choices. Who leads each group? Sally asked finally. You take one. Elena takes one. Maggie takes one. Catherine and Sarah can lead the other 2. They're strong enough. And you? I'm not going to Denver. All 3 women stared at him. Maggie spoke first. Jack, no. We need you. You need those 50 bounty hunters to not find you. The best way to make that happen is to give them something else to chase. Understanding dawned on their faces. Sally grabbed his arm. You're going to make yourself bait. Draw them away from us. That's the idea. That's suicide. Maybe, but it's also the only chance you've got. I'll head south. Make it obvious I'm running. Leave a trail even a blind man could follow. Most of those bounty hunters will chase the big prize. $5,000 is a lot more tempting than $1,000. What happens when they catch you? Elena's voice was tight. They don't. I was a ranger. I know how to disappear. I'll lead them on a chase through territory rough enough to slow them down. By the time they realize I'm not heading for Denver, you'll already be there. Maggie's eyes were bright with tears. This is a one-way trip. You know that. Even if they don't catch you, you'll be alone in the mountains in winter with no supplies and 50 men hunting you. I've survived worse. When? Jack didn't have an answer for that. He hadn't survived worse. But these women had survived years of Blackwood. They deserved a chance to see that survival mean something. It's not up for debate, he said. This is what's happening. You three get the women organized. 5 groups, different routes. Stagger your departures by an hour each so the trails don't cross. First group leaves at dawn. Last group leaves by noon. Which group do you want me in? Maggie's voice was barely a whisper. Jack wanted to tell her to take the first group, the safest group, the one most likely to make it. But that wasn't fair to the others. You're strong, Maggie. You take the last group. Help the weakest women. Get them to Denver. And then what? You're just gone after everything. After everything, you're free. That's what matters. He turned to walk away, but Maggie caught his arm and spun him back. Before he could speak, she kissed him. Hard and desperate, and full of everything they hadn't had time to say. When she pulled back, her eyes were fierce. You don't get to play hero and die alone. You come to Denver. You find us. You hear me. I hear you. Say you'll come to Denver. Maggie. Say it. Jack looked at her. At this woman who'd been beaten down by life and refused to stay down. Who'd offered herself as payment for protection and ended up becoming the protector. Who'd survived 5 years of hell and came out the other side still capable of caring about a broken blacksmith with too much guilt and too little sense. I'll come to Denver, he said. I promise. It was a lie. They both knew it. But sometimes lies were kinder than truth. The rest of the night passed in preparation. The women were divided into groups. Routes were planned. Supplies were distributed as evenly as possible. It wasn't much. Some dried meat, a few blankets, 1 rifle per group, and whatever other weapons they could improvise. Jack took nothing. He'd travel light and fast. All he needed was his rifle, his knife, and enough ammunition to make Blackwood's bounty hunters think twice about getting too close. Dawn came cold and clear. The first group prepared to leave. Sally led them 5 of the youngest and strongest women. They'd have the best chance. They'd take the most direct route and move fast. Jack walked with Sally to where the horses waited. Keep them moving. Don't stop except to rest the horses. If you see bounty hunters, don't try to fight. Scatter and regroup at the coordinates we discussed. I know the plan, Jack. I know. Just making sure. Sally surprised him by hugging him. Thank you. For everything. I know you think you're doing this to make up for the past, but you've given us something more valuable than rescue. You've given us the belief that we're worth rescuing. Jack's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. He just nodded. Sally's group rode out heading northwest. Jack watched until they disappeared into the trees. The second group left an hour later, then the third, then the fourth. Each time Jack felt the weight of it. These women trusted him, believed in him, and he was sending them into danger with nothing but hope and improvised tactics to protect them. Finally, Maggie's group was ready to depart. 5 women, including Becca, who'd stayed faithful at her post with the horses through everything. They looked scared but determined. They'd come too far to give up now. Maggie checked her pistol one more time. Jack had taught her to shoot in the hours before dawn. She was getting better. Not great, but better. It might be enough to keep her alive. Might. The ledgers, Jack said suddenly. Give them to me. What? No. We need them in Denver, and I'll get them there. But if Blackwood's men catch your group and find those ledgers on you, this whole thing is for nothing. Give them to me. I'll keep them safe. Maggie hesitated. Then she pulled the pack off her shoulder and handed it over. You better keep that promise. About Denver. I will. Another lie. But this one felt necessary. Maggie's group mounted up. The other women rode ahead. Maggie lingered for one more moment. Jack Hartwell, if you die on me before I get to know you proper, I'll track you down in the afterlife and kill you again myself. Understand? Yes, ma'am. Good. She kicked her horse and rode after her group without looking back. Jack stood alone as they disappeared. The sun was climbing now, burning off the morning mist. Somewhere behind him, Blackwood's bounty hunters were coming. 50 men hunting 26 women and 1 broken ranger. Time to even the odds. Jack mounted his roan and headed south. He made no effort to hide his trail. In fact, he made it obvious. Broken branches. Clear hoofprints in the snow. At one point, he even left his neckerchief tied to a tree like a flag. Come and get me, he thought. Chase the big prize. Forget about the women. Just focus on me. By noon, he knew it was working. He heard horses behind him. Lots of horses. The bounty hunters had found his trail and were following hard. Jack pushed his roan faster. Not too fast. He needed them to stay close enough to follow, but far enough they couldn't catch him. A careful balance. One wrong move, and he was dead. But dying had never scared him. What scared him was failing again. Letting these women down the way he'd let Emma and Lily down. So he rode. And behind him, 50 men followed. And ahead of him, somewhere in the distance, 5 groups of women were racing toward freedom. One of them would make it. Jack had to believe that. Had to believe this impossible rescue would end with someone surviving to tell the story, even if he wasn't around to hear it told. Jack led them south through country that got meaner with every mile. The mountains closed in like the walls of a trap, narrow passes that forced riders into single-file slopes so steep a horse could break its leg with one wrong step. He knew this territory from his ranger days. Knew where the game trails were, where the box canyons led nowhere, where a man could disappear if he was smart enough and desperate enough. He was both. By nightfall of the first day, he'd counted at least 30 riders on his trail. They stayed back cautious, not wanting to rush into an ambush. Smart. But their caution was costing them time the women needed. Jack made camp in a ravine sheltered from the wind. He didn't light a fire. Cold was better than dead. He ate jerky and hardtack and thought about Maggie's group, wondering if they'd made it through the first day. Wondering if Sally's group had reached the halfway point. Wondering if any of them would actually make it to Denver alive. The ledgers sat heavy in his saddlebag. 3 books that could bring down an empire. 3 books that 50 men would kill him for. He should have given them to Maggie. Should have trusted that her group would make it through. But he'd seen too many things go wrong in his career. Had watched too many sure things fall apart. At least this way, if the women got caught, they had nothing to confess to. Nothing Blackwood could use. Jack dozed, sitting up with his rifle across his knees. Ranger training never really left you. You learned to sleep light, wake fast, and trust your instincts when they screamed danger. His instincts started screaming around midnight. He was up and moving before his conscious mind processed what had woken him. A sound. Boot on rock. Someone trying to move quiet but not quite managing it. They'd sent scouts ahead. Tried to circle around him while he slept. Jack grabbed his saddle and gear, left everything else, and ran. His roan was already nervous, sensing danger. Jack mounted and kicked the horse into motion, just as gunfire erupted behind him. Bullets spanged off rocks. One cut through the air so close, Jack felt the heat. He leaned low in the saddle and let the roan run. Behind him, men shouted. Horses whinnied. They were coming hard now, abandoning caution for speed. Jack pushed deeper into the mountains. The trail he followed was barely a trail at all, more like a suggestion that something with 4 legs might have passed this way once. The roan stumbled twice, but kept moving. Good horse. Brave horse. Deserved better than dying in these mountains for a cause that wasn't his. The pursuit fell back as the terrain got worse, but they didn't quit. Jack could hear them still coming, relentless as death itself. Dawn found him 20 miles south of where he'd started. The roan was blown lathered despite the cold. Jack's own body ached from the night ride. But he was still alive. Still free. He stopped at a stream to water the horse and refill his canteen. While the roan drank, Jack studied his back trail. Nothing visible yet. But they'd be coming. A sound made him turn. Not behind him. Ahead. A rider appeared through the trees. Young man, maybe 25, with a bounty hunter's hard eyes and a rifle trained on Jack's chest. "End of the line, Hartwell." Jack's hand moved toward his own rifle, but froze when 3 more riders emerged from the trees on either side. He was surrounded, trapped. The young bounty hunter smiled. $5,000. That's what Blackwood's paying for you. Dead or alive, he said. I'm thinking dead is easier. Probably right about that, Jack agreed. His mind raced through options. 4 men, 4 rifles. No cover. His horse was too exhausted to run. The odds were impossible. "Where's the women?" another bounty hunter asked. "Older, harder. Blackwood wants them too." "Gone. Different direction. You've been chasing me while they rode for Denver." "That's so." The older man spat tobacco juice. "Well, we'll catch them after we collect on you. Tell me where they went, and I'll make your death quick." "Can't tell you what I don't know." It was the truth. Jack had specifically not asked which route each group was taking. That way, when they caught him, he couldn't give anything away, even if they tortured him. The young bounty hunter's finger tightened on his trigger. "Last chance, Hartwell." Jack's hand shot to his belt. Not for his rifle, for his knife. He threw it underhand, fast and hard. The blade caught the young man in the throat. The bounty hunter's shot went wild as he fell. Jack was moving before the body hit the ground. He dove behind his horse, using the animal's bulk as cover. The other 3 bounty hunters fired. The roan screamed and went down. Jack rolled behind the dying horse and came up with his rifle. He fired twice. 1 bounty hunter dropped. Another dove for cover. The odds were better now. 2 against 1 instead of 4 against 1. Still not good, but better. "Give it up, Hartwell," the older bounty hunter shouted. "You're outgunned and on foot. You've got nowhere to run." He was right. Jack's horse was dead. He was pinned down behind a carcass in the middle of nowhere with 2 men trying to kill him. But he still had the ledgers. And as long as he had them, as long as he was breathing, Blackwood couldn't win. Jack waited. Patience was a weapon too. The bounty hunters would get cocky. They'd think he was trapped. They'd make a mistake. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The sun climbed higher. Jack's legs cramped from crouching. His hands were numb with cold. Then he heard it. Movement. Someone circling around to flank him. Jack shifted position, tracking the sound. When the bounty hunter appeared through the trees, Jack was ready. 1 shot. Center mass. The man went down without a sound. That left one. The older one. The smart one. "That's 3 of my boys you killed," the man called out. "Blackwood's going to pay extra for that." "Blackwood's going to hang," Jack called back. "You're working for a dead man." "We'll see about that." Silence fell again. Jack knew what was happening. The bounty hunter was waiting for reinforcements. The rest of the hunting party would have heard the gunfire. They'd be converging on this position. Jack had maybe 10 minutes before he was completely surrounded. He couldn't stay. Couldn't take the time to bury his horse or gather supplies. He grabbed the saddlebag with the ledgers, his rifle, and what little ammunition he had left. Then he ran. The older bounty hunter fired at his retreating back, but the shot went wide. Jack crashed through the underbrush, not caring about noise, just needing distance. Behind him, men shouted. More gunfire. They were close now. Too close. Jack's lungs burned. His legs felt like lead. 5 years of blacksmithing hadn't prepared him for this kind of running. But he pushed harder. Thought of Maggie. Of Sally and Elena and Becca and all the others. They were counting on him to keep these ledgers safe, to give them time. He couldn't fail them. The terrain opened up ahead, a cliff edge. Beyond it, nothing but air and a 100-foot drop to a river below. Jack skidded to a stop. Behind him, the bounty hunters were closing in. He could hear them crashing through the trees. Maybe 30 seconds away. He looked at the cliff. At the river below. The water was moving fast, white with rapids. Falling from this height would probably kill him. Even if it didn't, the cold would. But staying here would definitely kill him. Jack took 3 steps back. Then he ran and jumped. The fall seemed to last forever. Wind screamed past his ears. The river rushed up to meet him. He hit the water like hitting concrete. The cold was a physical blow. It drove the air from his lungs and sent shock through every nerve. The current grabbed him and dragged him under. He tumbled helplessly, unable to tell which way was up. His lungs screamed for air. His body screamed to inhale. But inhaling meant drowning. Jack kicked hard. His boots felt like anchors. The saddlebag with the ledgers dragged at him. He should let it go. Should save himself. But these women had trusted him, had believed he'd get the ledgers to Denver. He kicked harder. His head broke the surface. He gasped air and went under again. The river was brutal, smashing him against rocks, dragging him through rapids. Every impact drove pain through his body. Jack caught a branch, clung to it, pulled himself toward the bank. His arms had no strength left. His fingers were numb, but he held on. Slowly, painfully, he dragged himself out of the river and onto the muddy bank. He lay there gasping like a landed fish, too cold and exhausted to move. Above him on the cliff, he could see the bounty hunters. They were staring down at him. One raised his rifle. The shot kicked up mud inches from Jack's head. But the range was too far. The angle too steep. The bounty hunters couldn't get a clean shot. Jack forced himself to his feet and stumbled into the trees. Behind him, he heard the bounty hunters cursing. They'd have to ride miles around to find a way down to the river. By then, he'd be gone. He hoped. Jack walked for 2 days. He had no horse, no food, and his ammunition was ruined from the river. All he had were the ledgers still dry thanks to the oilskin he'd wrapped them in, and a body that refused to quit despite every reason it should. He walked through snow that came up to his knees. Through forests so thick he had to force his way between trees. Through cold that made his bones ache and his thoughts slow. He thought about giving up, about finding a place to lie down and let the cold take him. It would be easy, peaceful even. But then he'd think about Maggie, about the promise he'd made, about how she'd said she'd hunt him down in the afterlife if he died. So he kept walking. On the 3rd day, he saw smoke. A cabin. Isolated. Probably a trapper or prospector living out here away from civilization. Jack approached carefully, called out so he wouldn't get shot. An old man appeared in the doorway with a shotgun. "Who are you, and what do you want?" "Name's Jack Hartwell. I need help." "You look half dead." "Probably more than half." The old man studied him for a long moment. Then he lowered the shotgun. "Come on then. But any trouble, and I'll finish killing you myself." The cabin was small but warm. The old man, who said his name was Eli, fed Jack stew and gave him dry clothes. Jack slept for 18 hours straight. When he woke, Eli was reading one of the ledgers. "Where'd you get this?" the old man asked. Jack's hand went to his knife, but Eli just held up the ledger. "Relax, I'm not going to rob you, but I recognize some of these names. My niece, Sarah Chen. She disappeared 3 years ago. Family thought she was dead." Jack sat up slowly. "She's not dead. She's alive, heading for Denver with 25 other women." Eli's hands shook. "Sarah's alive. Last I saw her, yes. She's one of the strongest women I've ever met. She helped plan the rescue, helped fight her way out." Tears ran down Eli's weathered face. "I looked for her, spent 2 years searching. Never thought I'd hear she was alive. She'll need you when she gets to Denver. She'll need family." Eli nodded. "I'll be there. I'll make sure she's taken care of." He handed the ledger back. "These are important. You need to protect them." "I know. There's men hunting you. I heard talk in town last time I went for supplies. Bounty hunters. They're searching every cabin, every camp. They'll be here eventually." "Then I need to leave. Can't put you in danger. You can't barely walk. You need another day of rest at least." "I don't have another day." But Eli insisted. and Jack's body was grateful. One more day of food and warmth and rest. One more day to recover enough to finish the journey. That night, sitting by Eli's fire, Jack told him everything. About Blackwood's operation, about the 26 women, about the impossible rescue and the desperate flight toward Denver. Eli listened without interrupting. When Jack finished, the old man was quiet for a long time. "You're doing something important," Eli said finally. "Something that matters. Don't you dare quit before you finish it." "Wasn't planning to." "Good. Because my Sarah's counting on you. All those women are counting on you." He stood and pulled something from a shelf. A rifle, old but well-maintained. "Take this. You'll need it." "I can't take your rifle." "You can, and you will. I've got another. And you're no good to anyone dead." Jack took the rifle. Checked the action. It was solid. "Thank you. Thank me by getting those ledgers to Denver. And when you see Sarah, tell her Uncle Eli never stopped looking, never stopped believing she'd come home." Jack left at dawn the next morning. Eli had packed him supplies, food, ammunition, warm clothes, enough to get him to Denver if he moved fast and didn't run into more bounty hunters. The journey took 4 more days. 4 days of constant vigilance, jumping at every sound, expecting ambush around every bend. But the bounty hunters had lost his trail. They were probably still searching around the river, thinking he'd drowned. Denver rose out of the plains like a promise. Civilization. Law. Safety. Jack rode into town looking like a ghost. Unshaven, gaunt, his clothes torn despite Eli's help. People stared. Some crossed the street to avoid him. He didn't care. He went straight to the federal marshal's office. Marshal James Thornton was older than Jack remembered. Gray at the temples, lines around his eyes. But when he saw Jack, recognition flared. "Jack Hartwell. Thought you were dead." "Thought I was too. But I've got something you need to see." Jack dropped the saddlebag on Thornton's desk, pulled out the 3 ledgers. Thornton opened the first one. His eyebrows rose. He opened the second, then the third. "Where'd you get these?" "Clayton Blackwood's safe. Before I burned his office down." Thornton's head snapped up. "You what?" Jack told him everything. Thornton listened with the same intense focus he'd had as a younger man, chasing outlaws across Texas. When Jack finished, the marshal sat back in his chair. "You just handed me the biggest trafficking case this territory's ever seen. Blackwood's operation, the bribes, the officials on his payroll, this is going to bring down half of Silver Ridge's government." "Good. They deserve it." "The women, where are they?" "Coming. Different groups, different routes. Should start arriving today or tomorrow if they made it through." "If Blackwood put bounties on all of us. 50 men hunting. I drew most of them off, but some groups might have been caught." Thornton stood. "I'll send deputies out on all the main routes. We'll find them." "Marshal," Jack's voice stopped him. "These women. They've been through hell. They've been beaten and starved and treated like property. When they get here, they're going to be scared, traumatized. They'll need—" "I know what they'll need, Jack. I'll make sure they're protected, all of them, and I'll personally escort each group to safety." Jack nodded. His body wanted to collapse. He'd done it. Against impossible odds, he'd gotten the ledgers to Denver. Now it was in Thornton's hands. "Where are you staying?" Thornton asked. "Don't know. Haven't thought that far." "Hotel down the street. Tell them I sent you. I'll cover the cost until this is settled. You look like you need about a week of sleep." Jack managed a tired smile. "Try 5 years." He left the marshal's office and walked through Denver's streets. The city felt overwhelming after so long in the wilderness. Too many people. Too much noise. But it was safe. The bounty hunters couldn't reach him here. He was checking into the hotel when he heard the commotion outside. Voices. Shouting. People running. Jack stepped back into the street and saw them. Sally's group. 5 women on exhausted horses riding into Denver like they'd conquered the world. Sally was in front, Her face determined, her back straight, despite the exhaustion Jack could see in every line of her body. People stared, whispered, but Sally ignored them. She rode straight to the marshal's office and dismounted. Jack ran toward them. Sally turned and saw him. Her face broke into a smile so wide it must have hurt. "Jack Hartwell, you lying son of a gun. You said you'd come to Denver." "I'm here, aren't I?" Sally laughed and hugged him hard enough to crack ribs. "We made it, all 5 of us. No one caught us." "The others?" "Don't know. We haven't seen any of them." Jack's heart sank. But before he could process that, another commotion started at the edge of town. Elena's group rode in 4 women instead of 5. One had been lost to cold and exhaustion, but 4 had survived. Then Catherine's group, all 5 intact. Then Sarah's group, 4 survivors. Jack counted, 19 women safe, 7 still missing. Maggie's group. The hours passed. Thornton arranged for the women to be housed in a boarding house, fed them, got them medical care, took their statements and promises to send deputies with warrants for Blackwood's arrest. But Maggie's group didn't arrive. Night fell. Jack stood outside the marshal's office, staring at the road south. Sally joined him. "They'll come," she said. "Maggie's too stubborn to die." "What if they got caught? What if Blackwood? Then we'll go get them, but give them time. They had the hardest route, the longest distance." Jack wanted to believe her, but with every hour that passed, hope dimmed a little more. Around midnight, he heard horses, slow horses, exhausted horses. He ran toward the sound. 5 riders emerged from the darkness. Maggie in the lead, Becca beside her. 3 others Jack recognized from Blackwood's compound. They were alive. Maggie saw Jack and her face crumpled. She slid off her horse and collapsed into his arms. She was crying, laughing, shaking. "We made it," she gasped. "We made it, Jack. All of us. We made it." Jack held her and felt something break inside him. 5 years of guilt and grief and isolation cracked open. He'd done it. He'd saved them. Not all of them had survived the journey, but enough had. Enough to matter. "You came to Denver," Maggie said. "You kept your promise." "I did. I knew you would." It was a lie. They both knew it. But sometimes lies became truth just by believing hard enough. The next morning, Marshal Thornton assembled all 24 women in the boarding house. Jack stood in the back watching. These women who'd been slaves were free now. Legally, officially free. Thornton explained what came next. Warrants for Blackwood and his men. Arrests of everyone on the bribery list. The ledgers would be used as evidence. The women's testimony would seal the case. "This won't be easy," Thornton warned. "You'll have to testify. Relive everything. Face Blackwood in court. Some of you might not want to do that." "We'll do it." Maggie's voice was clear and strong. "All of us. We'll tell our stories. We'll make sure he never hurts anyone again." The other women nodded. Even the quietest, most traumatized among them. They'd found their courage, found their voices. Blackwood was arrested 3 days later. His entire operation was dismantled. The corrupt officials were removed from office. The compound was burned to the ground. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. The trial took months. Jack stayed in Denver through all of it, testifying about the rescue, about the ledgers, about everything he'd seen. The women testified too. One by one, they stood in court and told their stories. Some cried. Some spoke with anger. All of them spoke truth. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Clayton Blackwood was found guilty on 27 counts of human trafficking, conspiracy, bribery, and a dozen other charges. He was sentenced to hang. Jack wasn't there for the execution. He couldn't watch. Revenge had never interested him. Justice did, and justice had been served. 6 months after the rescue, Jack stood on the porch of a new building in Denver. The sign above the door read, "Safe Harbor Home for Women." Maggie had organized it. With Eli's help and donations from people moved by the women's testimony, she'd bought a building and converted it into a refuge. Women escaping bad situations could come here, find shelter, find safety, find people who understood what they'd survived. "You should be proud," Jack told her. Maggie smiled. She looked different now, healthier, happier. The shadows in her eyes hadn't disappeared completely, but they'd faded. "We should be proud. This was your dream too." "No, this was yours. I just helped you survive long enough to achieve it." "You did more than help us survive, Jack. You gave us something to survive for." Jack didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent so long thinking of himself as a failure, as the man who arrived too late. It was strange to be seen as someone who'd arrived exactly when needed. "What will you do now?" Maggie asked. "Sally told me you're leaving Denver." "Going back to Silver Ridge. Someone's got to rebuild that forge." "You could stay here, help with the home. We could use someone like you." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm not good at staying in one place. Got too many ghosts." "We all have ghosts, Jack. The question is whether we let them haunt us or whether we learn to live alongside them." She was right. She was usually right. But Jack wasn't ready to stop running. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "If you need me, I'll come," he promised. "Anytime, any reason, you send word and I'll be there." "I know." Maggie stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Thank you, Jack Hartwell. For everything. For being the kind of man who opened his door in a blizzard. For being the kind of man who chose to fight when fighting seemed impossible. For being exactly who we needed when we needed him most." Jack left Denver the next morning. He rode back to Silver Ridge and rebuilt his forge. Started taking on work again, making horseshoes and fixing wagon wheels. But he was different now. The isolation was gone. Women from Safe Harbor would visit sometimes, bringing news from Denver, telling him about other rescues, other women finding their way to freedom. Sally came once with her uncle Eli. They'd rebuilt their relationship. Eli had helped her start a bakery. She was thriving. Elena came with news that she'd joined the Territorial Marshal's office, first woman ever hired. She was hunting down men like Blackwood, making sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. Becca came with a letter from a school in Denver. She'd learned to read and write properly. Was thinking about becoming a teacher. And Maggie wrote him once a month. Letters full of stories about the women she was helping, about the small victories and the ongoing struggles, about how the work was hard but necessary. Jack kept every letter. 5 years after the rescue, Jack got a message that Maggie was coming to Silver Ridge. She arrived on a spring morning with wildflowers blooming in the mountain meadows, and the air finally warm enough to breathe without pain. She looked beautiful, confident, complete. "I have news," she told him. "Safe Harbor is opening a second location, in Silver Ridge. We're going to make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else here." "That's good news." "And I'm moving here to run it." Jack's heart did something complicated. "That's also good news." "I thought you'd think so." Maggie smiled. "I figured it was time to stop letting geography keep us apart. If you won't come to Denver, I'll come to you." "I'm not an easy man to be around, Maggie. I've got too much past, too much guilt." "We all have guilt, Jack, but we don't have to carry it alone." She took his hand. "You saved 24 women. You brought down an empire of cruelty. You kept your promise when everything said you should break it. That's not a man drowning in guilt. That's a man who knows what redemption looks like." Jack looked at her hand in his. Thought about Emma. About Lily. About how they'd want him to live, not just survive. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to move forward. Neither do I. But maybe we figure it out together." Jack had spent 5 years believing he didn't deserve a second chance, that his failure to save his family meant he'd forfeited the right to happiness. But standing here with Maggie, with this woman who'd survived hell and chose to build heaven out of the ashes, he understood something. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to act anyway, choosing to fight anyway, choosing to live anyway. "Together sounds good," he said. Maggie's smile could have lit the entire territory. "Then let's get started." They did. Together they built a life in Silver Ridge. Together they helped dozens of women find safety and freedom. Together they proved that surviving wasn't enough. You had to choose to thrive. And sometimes, late at night, Jack would stand on his porch and look at the stars. He'd think about that blizzard night when 4 desperate women knocked on his door. About the choice he'd made to help instead of hide. About how one decision had changed everything. He'd think about Emma and Lily. About how they'd be proud. About how he'd finally become the man they'd believed he could be. And he'd whisper to their ghosts, "I did it. I finally did something that mattered." The wind would carry his words away into the darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, Jack liked to believe Emma was smiling. Because Jack Hartwell, the broken blacksmith who'd hidden from the world for 5 years, had finally learned the truth. You couldn't change the past, but you could choose what you did with the future. And that choice, that single decision to open a door in a blizzard and help 4 women who needed saving, had saved 24 lives and redeemed 1 broken soul.